On the deserted northern lands of South Korea, a group of hunters gathered on a campaign to clean these territories from evil spirits. Among the participants were both experienced hunters, for whom such trips were familiar, and those who went on such a trip for the first time. The excitement among beginners was natural, but the elders supported them, recalling that the main thing was to remain attentive. Ordinary portals and dungeons were much less dangerous than deserted lands. These were territories where from the beginning of the time the person's leg did not step, and therefore they were teeming with monsters. Sometimes it was even possible to meet one or two ancient creatures, much stronger than ordinary monsters. The leader of the group was a representative of the famous clan of warriors Lee, which instilled some calm in the newcomers. They considered him a strong warrior. However, more awareness knew, he was far from the strongest, just a bastard, expelled from the clan for mediocrity and lack of ambitions. His name was Lee Chaw, the 9th illegitimate son of the Lee clan, who by his years had reached only the 7th rank in martial arts. After a short halt, one of the fighters of the Dark Sword detachment, who was directly subordinate to the patriarch of the clan, suggested continuing the way. Chaw agreed, but he did not leave an alarming feeling. It seemed that the soldiers guarded him not to defend him, but to kill him. This heavy thought pursued him all the way, as well as the question, why did they all have this? After all, Chaw was expelled from the clan, and like a bastard for a long time had no value in the eyes of the family. But once he, like everyone else, dreamed of the future and hoped for the best. But at some point everything went wrong. As a child, he realized his responsibility as a possible heir to the strongest clan of warriors. During the ritual of the choice of steel, which determined the future of every warrior, he received the best weapon from the arsenal of the clan. Chaw decided that fate gives him a chance, and everything that remains for him is to work hard to earn recognition. But the miracle did not happen. Soon the clan doctor found a strange form of meridians, channels through which energy in the human body flows. The cross-country ability of his channels was so low that magic classes were impossible, and martial arts were given with great difficulty. In his case, even the achievement of the 9th rank would be considered a real miracle. The butler immediately informed the patriarch about the illness of the young heir. This was a huge disappointment for the patriarch. Chaw could become one of the strongest warriors, if not for the disease. From that day, everyone in the clan found out about his features, and his success on the ritual of choosing steel was explained by chance. Nevertheless, Chaw continued to train hard and proved that the doctor was mistaken. By the age of 25, he reached the 7th rank, although his brothers reached this in childhood. However, his efforts were underestimated, and by the age of 30 he was expelled from the clan. If not for his older brother, Chaw would have been killed and buried without a trace. Since then, he wandered around the world for 10 years, hiding from relatives. These were difficult times, similar to the struggle for survival in hell. The world gradually changed. The deserted lands expanded. The monsters attacked more and more often. Only those who had the patronage of strong clans were able to survive. Once Chaw learned from the news of the death of his father, Patriarch Clan Lee. Soon people from the Dark Sword detachment, Lee Clan Personal Guard, arrived at him. Chaw was amazed at how they found him, because now he looked like an ordinary beggar. The fighters did not answer his questions. They only handed over the order. He was not surprised at their silence. The warriors of the Dark Sword were always laconic. However, the content of the order shocked him. He was to explore the deserted Z1 zone. The meeting with the expedition was scheduled for 1830. The order was signed by the new patriarch, Lee Gunsleep, his third brother. This shocked Chaw in shock. He was sure that the authorities would move on to his older brother, more friendly to him. Chaw suspected that something had happened to his brother, but the fighters of the detachment were silent. He tried to object, saying that he had not kept the sword for a long time and remained only a master of the 7th rank. What is the benefit of him? But his words were regarded as a refusal to obey the order of the patriarch. And for refusal without good reason, the death penalty followed. Chaw, having weighed everything, agreed to fulfill the order, although he did not believe in his strength. He arrived at the gathering place and together with the group hit the road. Soon one of the participants noticed a strange building in the distance, an abandoned estate. To meet such in these lands was a rarity, especially since the building looked almost untouched. One of the fighters of the detachment ordered everyone to go inside. Armed with swords, the group carefully entered the estate. Their attention immediately attracted the giant skull of an ancient monster with a sword sticking out of his mouth. The expedition participants froze in surprise. At that moment, a detachment of a dark sword suddenly attacked his companions, attacking them from the back. They killed everyone indiscriminately, without any explanation. Chaw was shocked. He knew about the cruelty of a dark sword, but did not expect such a meaningless massacre. He and another survivor shouted to the attackers, demanding an explanation. but the soldiers silently continued to kill, obeying the order. Chaw, although he had not fought for a long time, managed to injure one of the attackers. Then he found out the order for his murder was given by the patriarch himself, Lee Gunsong. He ordered to lure them here and eliminate them without a trace. A fighter of a dark sword easily broke the sword of Chaw, turning it into debris. He added that they were to kill them without pain, only in the absence of resistance. The surviving participants desperately tried to escape. But the difference in the level of power was insurmountable, like an abyss. Chaw was in a hopeless position, weakened, without weapons, unable to protect himself. He became a light target for enemies. Although he was expected more, even despite his weakness, reality was severe. Chaw could even defeat a beginner who had just begun training, and yet he did not want to die so simple. To give at least the slightest rebuff, he needed a weapon. Chaw looked around in search of a sword, but everything was useless. And then his gaze fell on the sword in the mouth of an ancient monster. He thought, if this sword managed to kill such a creature, maybe they will defeat a person to them. Therefore, he decided to immediately grab the sword and pull it out of the skull to fight off the dark sword detachment. But his joy did not last long. The entire only thought out plan collapsed. The sword turned out to be so old and ancient that only a small part remained of it, and a strange black aura emanated from the wreck. One of the members of the detachment, seeing this, began to laugh, because he did not expect Chaw to be so weak and helpless. Only by the right to belong to the family, Lee did he honest Chaw of honest death. Chaw's life path ended, but in childhood he dreamed of becoming a patriarch of the Lee clan, who would be remembered for centuries. But fate prepared differently to him. His whole life was a struggle, and in the end it turned into an endless escape. Chaw did not understand why fate was so cruel to him, even despite his perseverance. And suddenly a strange aura began to come from the sword, enveloping his body. In an instant, he opened his eyes. In front of him stood his father, whom he considered to be dead, and the butler Choi, who discussed Yu Jung, mother Chol, who died under mysterious circumstances. Lee Tae-shin was the father of Chaw and the patriarch of the famous clan Lee. But he and Choi looked too young, which seemed strange. Chaw wanted to say something, but he could only reach out to be noticed. And then he saw. His hands became like a baby, which greatly surprised him. Now his hands were infant. Really, he was thrown into the past. Or is it just a dying dream? Chaw did not understand what happened to him. After all, he was killed. Is it really all that he would have imagined? Tai-shin decided that while he was small, he would be called Yun, and appointed him a nanny, and guarding a dark sword from a detachment. He also ordered Chaw to go through the steel ritual, along with the 8th child. The 8th child was the daughter of Tae-shina, the eldest Yuna for only a couple of months. But Tae-shin assured that the age difference does not matter, and the ritual should be carried out immediately. Chaw, on the other hand, was still in confusion, not fully understanding what was happening. Soon Tae-shin and Choi left, and Yun had a lot to think about it, including how to proceed. Everything that was happening did not look like a memory or sleep. It seemed frighteningly real. In addition, the conversation of his father and butler really took place in the past when Yun was a child. And although it was difficult to believe in it, everything indicated that Yun returned to the past. Several months have passed since his return, and today an important day has come for the Lee clan. The ritual of the choice of steel is a ritual during which the weapon itself chooses the heir to the clan, reflecting his talents. At one time, dozens of swords chose Tae-shin, thanks to which he became the greatest swordsman of his time. And the elder brother Lee Munjun was chosen by swords, scrolls, and even a staff, so he became the famous military magician. Today the ritual was to go through Yun, and his future depended on this. At the venue of the ritual, he was supposed to be accompanied by the nanny Moon Ga-un, who became his second mother. Both in the past and now, she violently supported Yuna and believed that he would become a worthy heir. Hajie always wished him only the best and remained nearby in any circumstances. In the past life of Chaw, her devotion cost her a place in the clan. She was fired in enemy slander. She then remained the only person who really worried about Chaw. But in this life, Chaw intends to prevent its exile and will do everything to protect the HVU. And then the time has come to go to the arena for the ritual of choosing steel. Even now, the GA continued to support the young master, assuring him that the ritual would be successful. They notified the head of the clan about the readiness of the ritual and invited him to the arena. Tai-shin also wondered what the result would turn out to be, especially for a child born from another woman. Everything was ready. It only remained to start. Today was a truly important day for the Lee clan, the day that will go down in history. The steel ritual was carried out in the arena filled with members of the clan. Of particular interest was the newborn Yun, born outside the official marriage. This did not give rest to the clan matriarch, Bak Grand-yong. Next to her was the clan advisor, Lee Tae-hong, who supported the young man. The first heir to the clan, Lee Munjun, was also present. Next to him was a second heir, Lee Gunsleep. Hyun aroused interest among Tae-han, despite the opinion of the majority who considered the boy bastard. Munjun was interested in the very fact of the ritual over such a small child. Gunsong agreed with him, suspecting something unkind of this. He dreamed of seizing power in the clan, and considered the appearance of Juna a serious threat, as in the past life of Chaw. But the time has come to start the ritual. Everything was ready, and everyone gathered. The first ritual was the 8th heiress of the clan Lee Drag. It was enough older sister Yuna, although only a couple of months older. To activate the ritual, the participant's blood was needed. Shin carefully cut her finger with a knife. The child was scared and cried, but the blood fell on the pedestal, activating the ritual. Silence reigned around, and the air lit up with a bright blue light, like an energy beam. Ray pointed to a sword, a relic from the arms chamber, an ivory sword. The true masterpiece of blacksmithing, which has not recognized anyone for a long time. Now the ivory sword was granted. It became its legal owner. The servants of the clan took this as a great event, and congratulated the matriarch on the talented heiress. She was happy, but she was still tormented by thoughts of Yuna, the fruit of the secret love of her husband. Now it was the turn of the next participant, Yuna, who was considered bastard. In the crowd, discussions and condemnation of the actions of the head of the clan began. But Tae-shin was confident in Yuna and believed in his potential. Hyun did not cry when his finger was cut, showing resistance. Before the ritual, Tae-shin said that he was proud of Young, despite rumors. In the last life of Chaw, he chose the sword of the heavenly rank Clean Echo, a powerful weapon. Now Hyun was wondering what weapons would choose him in this life. There was tense silence around, only whispers were heard. There were those who silently watched, for example, Jean, in the eyes of which cold rage sparkled. Her reaction was logical. She watched the child from the betrayal of her husband. The future of Yuna in the Lee clan will be difficult. He will have to go through a lot. He will interfere, for example, some elders, dissatisfied with its existence. Especially the main elder of the clan Lee is Lee Chol-jong. Tae-han understood that from such as Lee Chol-jong, it was worth waiting only to problems, and advised to be careful. A small dialogue ensued between them, the theme of which was the young Mr. Hyun. Chol-jong condemned Tae-shin, saying that he did not understand what the head of the clan thinks, conducting the ritual of choosing steel over the born by unknown from whom bastard. He also reproached Tae-han that he, like no one else, should know. It is pointless to conduct a similar ritual for illegitimate children. After all, Tae-hong, like Yun, was an illegitimate son whom no weapon chose. Chol-jong believed that this was not only useless, but also unacceptable, because such children do not have the right to belong to the clan. But Tae-hong did not become silent and decided to rudely answer the elder of the clan, but his words were interrupted by a bright radiance. Chol-jong and Tae-han were amazed to see the light emanating directly from the center of the ritual. Tae-hong, like Chol-jong, was shocked by what he saw, because before that he was not sure whether Yun could go through the ritual. The bright blue ray was unusually powerful, as if unimaginable energy had come from it. It was impossible to convey in words this spectacle. It fascinated everyone. The beam, who chose weapons for the air, first pointed to the spear of the spirit of blood, and then to the soldered sword. After that, he enveloped the relics, the divine crossbow of the sensitive dragon, and Mahu's divine sword. The center of the ritual drowned in a bright blue light. All the participants were beside themselves in amazement. But the most amazing was that the ray reacted even to the weapon, which already had the owner. Munjun was stunned by what he saw, calling this an unimaginable miracle, and noted that their younger brother seemed to have incredible talent. There was also talk in the crowd about how this is possible, because illegitimate cannot have the gift. However, Tae-shin urged everyone to calm, assuring that the ritual of the choice of steel could not be mistaken. According to the law of the clan, all the weapons that the boy chose should be granted to him, but the situation was so unusual that he decided to listen to the proposals. Tae-hong expressed the opinion that, although the law is such, if you give all the weapons to Yun, this will distort the very essence of the ritual. Therefore, he suggested that the boy choose his own weapon himself. The head of the clan accepted this proposal and allowed Yun to make a choice. Before the young master was an unusually wide selection. Almost all weapons nearby chose him. Now he had to choose one that would become his main weapon. However, Yun noted that everything was different in the past. Then only one powerful sword chose it, and now there was a whole arsenal in front of him. But he considered this a good sign. The future depended on his choice, and he should not miss his chance. And he went to the sword that was supposed to become his fate. The choice was really difficult. It was chosen by the Fura, a sword rakanobe of huge power. He was also attracted by spears, for example, a sacred spear, which could become an excellent weapon. And at the same time, Valheim, a staff from the branches of the World Tree, or Sword of the Heavenly Spheres, forged during the Parade of Planets. Great examples of weapons art were waiting for his solution, but he chose a rare sword found by the founder of the clan in unknown lands. The mysterious Black Dusk. It was only known about him that he could not be considered to be heavenly swords. However, it was stored among them, because it was the sword of the founder of the clan Lee himself. During the entire existence of the clan, the sword did not choose anyone, and Hyun was the first to recognize Black Dusk. Tae Shin took this as a sign of heaven and announced that Hyun chose the Black Dusk sword, and the ritual was completed. Such an outcome was not at all satisfied with Dva. She intended to get rid of him if he got up in her way. 9 years have passed since the ritual of the choice of steel. Much has changed. Young Mr. Yong grew up and began training, officially becoming the 9th son of the famous military clan Lee. He was supported by Ga, who became his replacement for his mother. Hyun always went to train in the first hall, which caused Ga to be enough curiosity. After all, he was far from the most spacious. But Hyun replied that someone was waiting for him there, so he was going there. Their conversation was interrupted by loud sounds coming from the 7th training site. There at that time he trained, the older sister of Yuna, enthusiastically honing the blows. Hyun called her 8th, but Ha had enough remark that it was impolite. For him, she was an older sister. However, Hyun did not understand why she should call her that, because she was only 5 months older. The training took in energetically. The teacher constantly corrected it, indicating how to hold the sword and strike. This was pretty angry with Lee's daughter, and she more than once broke into Mr. Back. She did not understand why it was important to keep the sword in a certain way, but Mr. Back assured that it was for her good. He explained that it was just needed perseverance, and over time she would succeed. Hyun was interested in who taught his sister martial arts. According to Ha-un, it was the commander of Baek-lee Hyun from the Ebonite detachment, a strong warrior. The boy became even more curious. Why such an outstanding warrior to teach a 9-year-old girl? Ha grabbed his words as envy of her sister, because she was taught by a real master, and Hyun trained alone. She assured that he would soon find teachers who would appreciate his talent. In this, she blamed herself, believing that she could not cope with the duties of the teacher. But Hyun assured her that he was grateful for everything, and she should not think so. He added that he did not need a teacher, because Lee Hyun taught only out of respect for their father. After that, the young man went to the first hall intended for training heirs. This hall was a historical place of Lee, more like a museum than to a training ground. But Hyun did not come here to admire history. A feature of the hall was that it stored the most ancient weapon of Lee clan. It was very bruised by time, but for Hyun it did not matter. After he returned from the past, many changes occurred with him. One of them was the ability to read the memories of weapons. Using this ability, he could move at moments when this weapon was in battle. He could find out the age of the weapon, the degree of attachment of the owner, and the technique of ownership. This helped him quickly improve his combat skills. In addition, he could clearly see the memories of the sword and master the techniques laid in it. For example, the Red Wind technique from the Sword of 7 Stars. Thanks to the granted ability, he learned all the movements of the Sword of 7 Stars, and not only them. For 2 years, he mastered the memories of most ancient weapons in the hall. Suddenly, Tae Han, a prisoner brother of the patriarch and minister of clan, approached him. He enjoyed great respect and was one of the few who sincerely cared for Yuna in the past. Hyun respected Tae Hona, calling him his uncle, although he did not like it too much. Tae Han was proud of his young man for his perseverance in training. He understood how hard Hyun had to be due to the attitude of the brothers, but he believed that he would overcome all difficulties and prove his value. Hyun assured that everything is in order, because he is now part of the clan Lee, where the motto is, "Respect is won by a sword." He promised to become stronger and gain respect in battle, defeating all his enemies if necessary. Tai Hong rejoiced at his mood, but deep down he was sad that Hyun was born out of marriage. But he decides to change the subject of the conversation, hinting that the name of the name will soon take place. There is very little time left before it. And even if Tae Han would like to become a teacher of the young master, thinking in advance that he would agree. But Hyun was still a different opinion, and replied that he could not accept his proposal, which was shocked by Tae Han, who did not understand the reason for the refusal. The young man explained that because of the rules of the clan, he cannot become someone else's student until a name is given to him. Tai Hong noted that his brothers and sisters have long spit on these rules, so the best teachers feed them well and teach them. But the young gentleman only replied that it is impossible to violate the rules, even if they are violated by everything around. Besides, as he already said, he wants to gain respect by a sword, and not in other ways. The boy's words were surprised by Tae Han. In him he saw the features of his older brother, Father Yuna, Tae Shin. Nevertheless, he decided to retreat, respecting the choice and life path of a young master. Only by calling the boy as stubborn as his father, Tae Hong thought that Hyun would become an excellent heir and head of the clan. But the trouble is, it seems that Tae-hong cannot help the young master, and it bothers him. Hyun says that this is not entirely true, and there is something that he would like to ask for. The young man would like to see what is under a secret warehouse, but he himself will not be able to get there himself. Tae-han was surprised at a strange request, but could not refuse. The next day, Tae-han, along with Hyun, went to a secret warehouse. The object was strictly guarded, so before entering it was required to present documents and indicate the purpose of the visit. It would be impossible to get here the youngest master, but with Tae-han it would be easier. Tae-han presented the purpose of the visit as an audit of the warehouse, and Yuna took with him supposedly to get acquainted with the work of adults. The participants of the Lee clan were devoted, so they willingly said, "I serve the clan." For the rest of the road, Yoon portrayed Tae-han would not suspect anything. Tae-han was interested in whether the young man really liked the territory of the secret warehouse, but his reaction seemed sincere. Yoon added that interest is unusual, because not only the treasures of the clan, but also the best weapon are stored here. It was here that the young master was extremely necessary. Legendary swords, relics, the existence of which is difficult to believe until you check yourself. If someone is looking for such things, they will say to him, "It is necessary to eat it in a weapon warehouse." The young gentleman portrayed excessive surprise, and Tae-han, not knowing about pretense, rejoiced. On the way, Tae-hong said that a weapon is stored in the basement of the warehouse, which for some reason was isolated. Yoon added that he heard about the existence of weapons of a monstrous rank, capable of devouring the owner. Tae-han was surprised at the young man's awareness, and confirmed, there really is such a weapon. It devours the heart and body of the owner to the bones. Thus he wanted to scare the young man, but to no avail. Tae-hong went on business on the upper floors, offering a young master to look around, but warning not to enter the basement. Yun was delighted with such a development of events, even despite the ban. While Tae-han is busy, Yun will have a chance to find what he needs. The basement of a secret weapons warehouse, also known as a weapons cemetery, served as a place of isolation of dangerous artifacts. The purpose of this trip is to find a weapon called limitless, which initially looks like an ordinary dagger, but if you fill it with mana, it can change shape and weight. Once Gunsong found this weapon and received the title Variable, reflecting his essence. That is why in the past Gunsleep became a patriarch after the death of Tae Shin and not the eldest son, even though he was more suitable. He also ordered to find and kill Yun. So far, it was all that he managed to find out. To avoid such a fate, the young master needs to find a suitable sword himself. It will not work out the first time, but Yun intends to get the title of Changeable. However, the rainbow mood quickly changed to anxious. An hour passed, and the suitable weapon was never found. It turned out to be more difficult to find Boundless than it seemed at first. But Yun was sure that it was somewhere here. Perhaps he was simply rearranged. By accident, he hit a rusty ancient sword that fell to the ground. The young man did not even assume that it could be limitless, taking him as an old piece of iron. But something went wrong when he tried to consider the history of weapons. It seemed that he did not recognize the story of the dagger, but the dagger was studying it. At the moment of the young gentleman, he transferred to another world, to the memories of the dagger. At first he did not understand where he was, but he soon guessed that these were most likely memories. These memories were much more realistic and alive than everything he had seen before. So alive that any rustle forced to tremble, and not in vain. He was not alone here. Something terrible lurked in the memoirs, from which the blood was in the veins. The ancient monster once emerging from the blue portal, absorbing entire civilizations. Before the young stood a monster of an apocalyptic rank with incredible power. It was impossible to fight him. It was necessary to run. But behind the unknown person with a bloodied sword appeared. The bloody was not only a sword, but also a person who resembles a warrior. Yun did not understand what was happening and what to do. Nearby a monster and an unknown warrior. Suddenly the warrior rushed to the attack, holding a sword. He seemed to not know fear. No doubt attacked the monster. For him, a monster, terrifying a young man, was like a low-ranking slime. With one blow, he knitted him, like a dissecting demon. The sight was so exciting that the young man was delighted. After a blow on the side of the monster, an explosion flashed. Yun did not believe his eyes. A monster of an apocalyptic rank defeated with one blow. He was scared, but he held on when a warrior appeared in front of him. He asked who he was and why he came here. Yun was surprised, because usually he was not noticed in his memories. Without waiting for an answer, the dissecting demon cut his sword, saying that he was doing this out of mercy, to send him back. Yun was horrified, thinking that he died in his world. He did not understand how this happened. His hands were trembling, and he dropped the dagger. The pressure was so strong that it almost bent to the ground, and the dagger began to melt the surrounding one. Soon, Yun realized, this was the very Boundless he was looking for. To make him his own, he held a ritual, similar to the ritual of choosing steel. Around everything shone, as in legends, which meant the adoption of the sword. Now the boundless belonged to him, and thanks to him, Hyun could become the governor of the 100,000th troops. The boy immediately decided to try out a new sword, using the studied martial arts, and he was pleasantly surprised. Now his life path will change forever. A week has passed since the day that Hyun gained Boundless, and he has already begun training. After a trip to a secret weapons warehouse, he turned the Boundless into a ring so that no one would guess about its existence. But still he was curious what happened when he looked into the history of the dagger. Namely, he saw a blow demonstrated by that warrior. The warrior showed a blow and called it a dissecting demon, but he must have considered that it was too early to study such techniques for the boy. In addition to the crushing force, the blow was executed with extraordinary grace, which became a strong motivation for the young man. Let him still know much now, but he has nowhere to hurry. He has time to study ancient martial arts. Due to his memory and abilities, he managed to remember all the movements of the warrior exactly. But there was little sense in this, because he was not an adult man, but only a 9-year-old boy. Attempts to copy the movements of an adult body brought young benefit. It was almost useless. Therefore, his goal began to adapt the reception under his children's body. The main thing here is not to rush and be attentive to the details so that the movements are natural. After all, you need to handle the sword so that it is convenient for its growth and weight, in other words, to adjust everything to your body. Well, the young man has already taken the first steps, and very successfully. We can say that he moved in the right direction. It remained only to learn how to effectively use mana. He tried to use experience from a past life for a long time, but nothing happened, as if he had forgotten something important. Therefore, he could only continue to stubbornly develop mana management skills. Without wasting time, he continued to practice the blow when an unexpected guest secretly made his way to him. At the moment when Hyun waved his sword to hit the ground, the blade was seized by an unknown girl. The young man was extremely surprised. He was used to training alone, occasionally seeing only Tae honorable. Grabbing the blade, the girl asked the boy who taught him this technique, but Hyun said nothing. He did not understand who was standing in front of him. He only guessed that it was someone from the family. She had the same dark hair and yellow eyes. This also surprised the girl. For some reason, she thought that Hyun knew her. But this was not a curiosity for her. According to her, she rarely left the house. She introduced herself like Gyon Ha and then asked the name of the young master. Gyon Ha was pleased to meet you, young. Not calculating his strength, she grabbed his hand and began to shake her with joy. Hyun recalled that he had heard her name in a past life. Gyon Ha is his father's younger sister. Tai Hong talked about her and mentioned that her grandfather did not really like her. However, he was surprised that Gyon Hyun did not at all realize what great power actually possesses. Nevertheless, she insisted on her. She was extremely interested in where Hyun learned this technique. Gyon Ha noted that in this blow, ancient martial arts are guessed, with which she was fond of all her soul. In addition, she said that in ancient times, giant creatures lived on Earth. As a gift, she brought Hyun to a book associated with ancient knowledge, with applied her own notes. Hyun was delighted with such a gift. Perhaps with his help he would find answers to his questions. And even if the handwriting in the book was sometimes difficult to make out, he came across a page describing the mana control technique. In addition, the book contained knowledge about the ancient martial arts of a high level, although the analysis of handwriting remained a problem. Therefore, he asked Gyon Hyun to help him figure it out, and she was only glad, especially given his interest in ancient techniques. Gyon Hyun explained to him that in the past they used only channels, not meridians, unlike modern techniques, where the center of energy is in the heart. She added that it was unfair to consider ancient techniques outdated. Hyun did not think about this before. Gyon Ha was sure that ancient methods of chi energy is superior to modern ones. Hearing this, Hyun immediately rushed to use a new technique, because it was she who was perfect for the boundless. Mana should be distributed from the heart throughout the body without returning to the center. It should circulate through the channels. This is exactly what Hyun lacked a complete understanding of the blow of that warrior. Now everything was different. With new knowledge, he seemed to be successful. Hyun was pleasantly surprised, and Gyon Ha, stunned by what he saw. She saw this for the first time. The young gentleman perceived this as a small but important victory. He confidently moved forward. Gyon Ha's interest only intensified. She wanted to know how he did it and what kind of technique it was. Hyun replied that this was a technique of amplification, but the pressure from Gyon Ha was too persistent. He did not really want to share all the details, preferring to act in silence. But Gyon Hyu did not retreat. After all, the boy was able to apply the technique after reading her abstracts in which she invested years of labor. She said that for more than 10 years, she was looking for a way to master the technique of amplification, even after she was expelled. As a result, Hyun agreed to tell, but put forward several conditions. The first condition was to not tell anyone about him without his permission, even to his father and uncle. Gyon Ha took an interest in which Hyun replied that he did not love when they were talking about him behind him. The girl accepted this with understanding, remembering her experience with sadness. The second condition was not to lie to each other in order to build trust without unnecessary suspicions. It turned out to be not easy for Gyon. She loved to not speak, but nevertheless agreed. And there was a third condition that Hyun decided to keep silent about. A year has passed since the young gentleman received the Boundless and began training with Gyon Ha. At this time, he was running to him with a letter. She fled and on the move loudly called him by name, which slightly frightened Yuna. Ha was enough of a letter addressed personally to the young master. Gyon Ha was also curious but Hyun guessed that this was an invitation to the name of the name of the name. And he turned out to be right. It was an official invitation signed by the deputy head of the clan, Munjun. This was a little alarm to the young man. The head should sign such letters, but if he is not, then he goes to the deputy. In addition, he did not hear that his father leaves somewhere. However, for Gyon Ha, the news was extremely unpleasant. She was upset because she just began to master new tricks with Young, and the ceremony will take a long time. This is not just a reward, but a real test. Together, they studied the techniques of mana management, combining ancient and modern knowledge. They managed to develop a method uniting both techniques, a dream to which Gyan has for many years. Now Manu could be stored both in the heart and in the channels, which gave great effectiveness. Therefore, Gyon Ha did not want Hyun to leave her. There was still so much work ahead. But Hyun reassured her, promising to quickly pass the ceremony and return to training. He was configured to go through the tests as soon as possible and return to the study of new technology. The first stage of the ceremony was a check for stamina. The participants needed to withstand magic attacks for half an hour. The test was supposed to conduct the test commander of the Bloody Tiger Detachment and teacher, Zhang of the Criminal Code. Zhang of the Criminal Code believed that an illegitimate boy could not cope because he was not trained on purpose. But he was mistaken. Right now, Hyun repelled magical attacks using control of mana. He even managed to be distracted during the test, for which the teacher considered him too impudent. Moreover, Hyun volunteered to compete with the 8th heiress, wanting to test his strength and skills. It was strange for Zhang, how the bastard turned out to be so gifted. It seemed inappropriate to call him so inappropriate. As a result, the teacher decided to overestimate his views on Jun and even intended to personally train him, not only for the ceremony. The first stage is completed. For the young master, he was not difficult. Nevertheless, Hyun considers it very strange to work out magical attacks on children, arguing this with an increase in their stability. But what he did not expect was an apology from the teacher Zhang the decree. They were rather sincere, and his tone changed for the better. However, it was time to go to rest in order to prepare for the next stage, but at the exit he was met by an older sister. She immediately decided to show aggression, trying to hit Yuna in the face. After such a loud greeting, he insists that they need to talk. But Hyun answered with rudeness to rudeness and had no much desire to talk to her. This angered the KHVU, and she decided once again to remind her younger brother that she was a legal daughter, while he was a bastard. But Hyun did not care about this. He simply replied that he did not have time, since he did not want to contact her. Enough this was taken by surprise even stronger, and she decided to use force, already using mana. But such a trick no longer worked with the current young, who honed martial arts and management of mana for a year. He counterattacked her and grabbed his jacket by the gate. He did not expect like that. On emotions, Hyun told her that she would go to arrange tantrums of her mother, because he does not need it. But she stated that all this was because of him. If he had not demonstrated his talent on the steel selection ritual, everything would be different. Since then, she was constantly compared with him, forced to follow a strict regime and train daily, while Hyun was born gifted. A surge of emotions led to the fact that she ceased to control her speech and accidentally admitted that her mother was to blame. But the young man only replied that this was her fault, and not him, because she has everything, and he has to achieve everything on his own. Therefore, if she really hates him so much, let him become better than him. Then he will apologize for his words. These are the rules of this family. Hyun left, and only shouted after that she would necessarily surpass him at the ceremony and make him apologize. But the young man was like she screamed there. He was sure that he would become the winner. After that, she grabbed the 7th hall to continue training. At this time, her mother, patriarch of the clan, Jana, wanting to talk with her daughter, the patriarch of the clan. All this time, she trained grabbedly and did not even notice how her mother entered. She was surprised to hear her mother's voice and turning around seeing her. Eun came because she was reported. In training, she showed the result worse than Yuna, and she considered it unacceptable. From this, Dvan was furious, because for years the daughter drove into the head of the idea of the need to crush the rivals. Unuan was disappointed with her daughter and stated that it was better to abandon the warrior's path if she trains only out of fear of her mother. But she grabbed this, proving that she acts of his own free will and really wants to surpass the younger brother. Such words were even more struck by Granda Young. It was outrageous for her that her daughter was motivated by rivalry with some kind of second-rate child. Grayson once again reminded, her daughter is the legitimate heiress of the clan, and Hyun is just a bastard, and she should be above him, and not compete on an equal footing. Then she handed a grace of a sleepy moth, a deadly poison, believing that if a daughter could not surpass the boy, she should destroy him. After all, these were the rules of the family Lee. Only the strongest has the right to life. Meanwhile, Hyun continued to progress. In just 14 weeks, he managed to raise a common rank to 1. For a 9-year-old young man, this was a great result, especially considering that he studied on his own. Although in this, he recognized the merit of Gya. But suddenly their conversation was interrupted by loud sounds resembling the clatter of elephants. Of course, it was Gyon Ha who was looking forward to the moment when he and Youth could resume training. The young man only returned from training, but Hyun insisted on her, assuring that training with mana techniques relieved fatigue. Hyun has never heard of this. On the contrary, he believed that such training tires even more. And yet the boy agreed. He also wanted to demonstrate something to the aunt. Gyon Ha was beside herself in surprise. The young master reached the first star. Usually, the study of mana techniques is divided into 3 stages. The first is the iron body that strengthens the physical shape. The second is Qigong, when mana is transformed and requires great control. And the third is the stage of superpowers, when the mana management reaches the level inaccessible to a mere mortal level. However, the Gyon Ha method was different. Even at the first stage, it was possible to achieve superpowers. Therefore, she divided the study of the technique into the so-called stars. She was interested in how he managed to master the direction of energy through the channels so quickly. Hyun replied that this was thanks to their training, although sometimes they were unpleasant to him. After all, mana is like water. It has natural fluidity, and the human body is arranged as a vessel for mana. This was motivating Gyon Ha. Even if she herself will need much more time, she also dreamed of reaching the top. She greatly appreciated the achievements of a young man who studied the technology she developed. But stopping on 1 star would be stupid. You need to move to the achievement of 2. Hyun was surprised at this pace, but the aunt explained that the first star is just overcoming the stage of the iron body, the most easy. Gyon Ha asked the young master that he does the best. What is his strong side? Thinking a little, he replied, fencing. But the aunt did not agree. This surprised Yuna because he did not remember that he showed her his fencing skills. However, Gyon Ha admitted, sometimes when she was bored, she secretly watched him, and she believed that he has a much more outstanding ability than owning a sword. In her opinion, his real force consisted in managing mana, which greatly surprised the boy. In a past life, they laughed at him precisely for the fact that he was a complete zero in the management of mana. But Gyon Ha was sure. This is precisely his calling, and he would not be difficult to get the 2nd star. In addition, with his skills, the name ceremony will be a light walk for him. Now the time has come to teach the young man real techniques requiring special attentiveness. Hyun was morally prepared and was in anticipation to find out what new techniques are waiting for him. Gyon Ha also brought a box with her, which interested the boy. Aunt decided not to tell right away, but to show what is in the box. Suddenly, an object flew past Hyun, catching his face slightly. It was a metal ball thrown by Gyon Ha. In the box, there were metal nuclei designed to train mana control in motion. After all, standing still is almost useless. It is much more important to be able to control mana in motion. Hyun realized that training is acquired by a new charm and would be different from the previous ones. All this was necessary to prepare for the name of the name, where he was to show his best sides. The 2nd stage of the test came, which will conduct the leader of the Bloody Tiger Detachment, Lee Jong-kwan. His first task was to choose a weapon that the heirs would use. Exactly 1 minute was given for this. Already at the very beginning, a small conflict arose between Snow and Young. It seemed to the boy that his sister was looking at him suspiciously. It was just interesting what kind of weapon the brother would choose. She was sure that it would be a sword. But the young gentleman armed himself with a whole arsenal, not limited to 1 sword. Jung-kwan did not quite understand why the boy had so many weapons, because it was necessary to choose only what he owns best of all. However, Hyun replied that he owns all this weapon at a good level. The teacher regarded such a decision as stupidity than the potential of the boy. But now is not the time for conversation. The hour has come to start training, so both heirs should listen carefully. Jung-kwan, although he said that he would teach their martial arts, it would not be quite familiar racks and techniques. In these training, they will comprehend secret knowledge about techniques called educational. Since they are already familiar with the basics, it is time to learn secret techniques because the sixth feeling is hidden in their blood, and now they have to try to arouse it. The sooner they do it, the better it will be for them. I did not understand what the teacher was going to do, so she wanted to enlist the help of a younger brother, but he only advised her to prepare. And unexpectedly, the teacher was already right in front of Jun's nose. The boy did not even think that Jongkwon would begin to attack so sharply. He did not even really have time to react to block the blow. Although he managed to put the blow was still too strong and the block did not save. But this surprised the teacher. The boy still managed to put the block at the very last moment. And yet, Hyun did not intend to give up. He wanted to show everything he was capable of. Indeed, in a past life, he could not withstand these training, but this time everything will be different. However, his attempts were unsuccessful. The difference in the power between him and the teacher was colossal. The same thing concerned and grabbed. She also could not even get to Jongkwon. A month has passed since the day they started training under his leadership. The training was heavy. They had fractures and damage to internal organs. This is not something that usually happens with 10-year-old children, but Hyun was not an ordinary child. He is the heir to the great clan Lee. During the training of Hyun, they often lost consciousness. By the way, the young man even got the calculation. He lost consciousness 16 times, while he was 22. Jongkwon noticed the features of the heirs. The eighth heiress had high endurance. She did not receive serious damage even after excessive loads, while Hyun was very different from her. First, the teacher took him as a fool, because he brought several types of weapons at once. But this turned out to be a mistake. As it turned out, he really owns them equally good. It seems that Hyun was already beginning to guess how to arouse his sixth feeling. Despite the exhaustion, the training continued at the usual pace. But Hyun understood that it was time to do something, and offered to unite. According to his signal, they had to detain the teacher with a block. The girl's pride prevented her from listening to her younger brother, and even more so to help him. But after thinking a little, she discarded her discontent and agreed to unite. After that, she immediately rushed to the attack. Everything she needed was to try to keep the teacher. Meanwhile, Hyun was behind her, waiting for the moment for his attack and to distract attention. After all, he could not cope alone, but together they had a chance. The teacher was surprised that after so much time they decided to act with a team. Perhaps they will even succeed. After an attack by a spear, Hyun successfully repelled the next teacher's attack. But Jongkwon was not going to stop and move to the active phase of the attack. Now, all the attention of the teacher was focused on Yuna, which allowed him to attack the ambush. Understanding this, Hyun gave a signal to his sister. Her time came. She suddenly jumped out and blocked the teacher's attack with a sword, winning several precious seconds for Hyun. Meanwhile, Hyun changed his spear to a sword and prepared to attack from the back. To increase the chances of success, he filled the sword of mana. Now he could deliver a powerful blow thanks to the technique of boundless, dissecting demon. All the attention of Jongkwon was focused on enough, and he missed Hyun from sight. However, such tricks are not so easy to crank up against a martial artist of this level. But the attack by the sword was deceiving. The true goal was a fist. Hyun filled his fist by mana and hit with all his might, but Jongkwon managed to block the blow. The boy had already thought that he had won, but, raising his eyes, he saw his tiny fist was squeezed in a massive palm of the teacher, and after a second a return attack followed, which Hyun could not repel. Nevertheless, the teacher appreciated the resourcefulness of the boy and recognized his efforts. 37 days. It took Hyun so much to awaken the sixth feeling with which Jongkwon congratulated him. However, it is impossible to dwell on this. There are still many tests ahead. On this note, the training ended. Hyun aroused the sixth feeling and stopped training. Nevertheless, the blow of Juna left a mark even on the teacher, despite the fact that he used Manu, although the rules forbade her to use. Jongkwon was sure a sense would come out of the boy. He understood what the battle tactics were, and his older brothers should be afraid of him. On the 47th day, the sixth feeling was awakened by the UNB, after which Jongkwon completed his studies. Now they had time to rest and understand the knowledge gained. At this time, Yuna was visited by the elder brother Munjun, their first meeting face-to-face. Munjun was the first son of Tai Shin, the owner of the title Double Star, as well as the second rank in martial arts and magic. He was simultaneously respected and afraid, but for Hyun he was the only beloved brother. Munjun apologized for not having previously paid attention to Hyun, the fault of the clan's work. He was pleasantly surprised that Hyun immediately recognized him, despite what he saw for the first time. The young man replied that although they were half-brothers, he could not help know what his older brother looked like. However, Munjun did not like that Hyun called himself a half-brother. For him, he was a full-fledged member of the family. Nevertheless, Hyun was strict towards himself and tried not to allow himself to be too much. Munjun asked to do without formalities. After all, they are brothers. In honor of their first meeting, he brought Hyun a gift bought in France when he studied at the Eiffel College of Magic. It was a miraculous medicine called Nectar of the Gods, which will be useful to Hyun more than himself. This nectar was the most expensive healing potion, and the magicians of France produced it in the volume of only half a liter a year. Munjun was surprised by the reaction of Juna, because he was different from the rest. Others saw only an opponent in him, so he expected the same reaction. And yet he was happy that he was not mistaken. The younger brother was really different from the rest. However, Hyun said that he still sees an opponent in him after all. They are both heirs of the clan, and the competition between them is inevitable. Who knows, perhaps Hyun will grow up and become his strongest opponent. Munjun was glad to hear this. Hyun was the only one who treated him with a smile, even despite the struggle for the inheritance. Therefore, he did not object to such rivalry. A few days later, it was time for the final stage of the ceremony of the name of the venerable clan Lee. She was supposed to go on a red-blue island, known for her changing depending on the concentration of mana soil. From ancient times, it was here that the ceremonies of the Lee clan were held, and now the hour has come to prove himself. At the final stage, the heirs had to survive on the island for 3 weeks. This should have shown their resistance. In order to save them in case of danger, everyone will be given objects to track the location, which are better not to remove. After 3 weeks, the stage will end and they will be taken away. They should have seriously reacted to this test, because it would summarize their preparation. Having landed on the island, the young lady wanted to tell the younger brother something important. Hyun replied that he had long understood everything, deciding that she had finally recognized his strength. But I had in mind completely different, but also associated with their rivalry. She gestured him to hide the clock and put them in his pocket. And then she shows him the poison of the sleepy Morok, which her mother gave her to use against Yuna. The young man was surprised to see him, because he expected a completely different one. I continued, explaining that the poison is valid only on children under 15 years old, and if you leave the bottle open for 5 minutes, it will completely evaporate. The poison also for a long time deprives a person of the opportunity to use mana. Hyun was wondering where he got this poison, but he did not receive an answer. And at the same moment she breaks the bottle on a stone without any hesitation. With this act, she wanted to show her younger brother that she was not going to cheat in their rivalry. She intended to defeat him honestly without any tricks, and therefore would not poison him. Hyun was surprised at such a development of events and determination of the elder sister. From that moment on, he decided to relate to their rivalry more seriously, as he was enough. First, you had to get comfortable on the island. He grabbed him to be careful. Hyun regarded this as a care, but his sister immediately denied that a small dispute caused them. They were interrupted by loud sounds that came from the depths of the island, probably from monsters. Therefore, it was dangerous to stand still. It was time to study the island and look for asylum. I grabbed to start from the coast, without delving into the island. Hyun intended to go right into the very heart of the island and equip his refuge there. Meanwhile, she had already enough fighting with monsters, successfully completing the first task, hunting. Their actions were observed by representatives of the highest composition of the Lee clan, and the majority put it on it. The elder of the clan openly supported the 8th heiress, extolling her like a deity, claiming that she was born for success. Zhongquan also recognized her progress, although he previously believed that she would take at least 2 months to awaken. And although there was enough gifted, there was nothing supernatural in it. But someone was able to stoop it a lot. This turned out to be someone who aroused special interest among the teacher. Since the elder made KVV with his favorite, he despised Yuna in every possible way. While grabbing the monsters, Hyun peacefully searched for a safe place, for which Chol-jun contemptuously called him a rat. However, the elder brother and deputy head of the clan, Munjun, objected, believing that in such conditions to find a safe place is a manifestation of foresight. Other elders only grinned, noting that their expectations were overstated thanks to the successes of the 8th heiress. But the main elder continued to blame Yuna, considering him an unworthy member of the Lee clan. Munjun did not share this opinion, bitterly thinking about how their clan fell low if they mocked the child because of his origin. Nevertheless, now there was no time to think about it. Jun's actions aroused much more interest, and he was not the only one who worried about the boy. Tae-han was also worried about him. At this time, Hyun had already found a suitable place for asylum. First, he divorced a bonfire, which served not only the source of heat, but also the place for the manufacture of drugs. It was also important to hide the camp from prying eyes well. But soon something strange began to happen that the chief elder immediately noticed. Hyun took off the clock, tracking his location and action. Then he took off the medallion, put it on the leaves, and went for another party. The young man carefully covered everything with leaves so that no one saw what he was doing. This caused a violent reaction among observers. Zhongquan only grinned, calling Yun unpredictable, and Munjun and Tai Han were alarmed. But for Yun, this was necessary. Now he could use the boundless without the risk of being noticed. Without surveillance, he could act freely. But there were also disadvantages, for example, difficulties with the restoration of mana. But one of the problems was to prepare an elixir that would help to strengthen Manu. To do this, he had to cook tea from mana leaves, which looked very doubtful. In a past life, he did not even have money for the easiest elixir. It is good that he learned something from ant grass. Gyon Ha taught him to prepare tea from mana leaves. After all, they were abundant on the island, and the drink increased the energy potential. Following her instructions, Yun cooked this miracle one, although he was afraid of him. His fears were confirmed. The tea was just disgusting, so his 3-week struggle for survival began. 17 days have passed since the final stage of the named ceremony, and the young heirs have already mastered the island. But something alarming was happening in the Munjunga office. One of his subordinates, judging by the expression, brought unkind news. This was the deputy captain of the detachment by Zhong, who personally subordinates Munjong, Yuchan Honorable. He reported a large group crossing the border of the Republic of Korea. He also noted that he was watching them, waiting for the riots. But so far they behaved quietly. The problem was that they were just 2 days from the mines of the stones of the Mana clan Li. Munjong suggested that as a rule such gangs attack only poorly protected villages and act according to plan. Chan Ho added that perhaps they are not just wanderers, but a dummy person, behind which there is a serious power. It also became known that the Kowloon group collects forces in the north borderland, often provoking Li clan. Most likely there was a leak of information about the temporary absence of the head of the clan, and now, the best time to attack. Munjong asked if the scouts had details, but Chan Ho replied that so far only they know. He thanked him for his work and ordered him to transfer information to scouts and work together to find out more. After all, this was clearly not just raising the bandits, which caused serious concerns. Meanwhile, a secret teleport was activated on the island at night. Someone imperceptibly entered the island, and this someone clearly came with unkind intentions, knowing about the presence of the heirs of Li clan. However, for some reason it was Yun, whom he planned to kill for 2 days for some reason. Meanwhile, Yun continued to fight for survival, fighting Draco, the 7th-rank monsters from the dragon family. This required great power, concentration, and endurance from him, but he had no choice. In addition, Draco erupted the fire, burning everything in their path. Yun needed to avoid their attacks as soon as possible so as not to burn alive. At the moment when the monster lost sight of him, he turned into a counterattack. Using the boundless and the dissecting demon technique, his most powerful technique at that time, he easily defeated the dragons. Now it was not difficult for him to kill them, but if he encountered them in the early days on the island, there would be nothing left of him. On the 19th day of his stay on the island, he discovered Draco's lair in the very center of the red-blue island, but it was pointless to stay there for a long time. However, something attracted his attention. Yun noticed strange creatures that appeared in the center of the island. These were the 8th-rank reptilians, stronger than Draco. Usually they live closer to the shore, but do not enter the center of the island. Moreover, when Yun tried to attack them, they ran away, which meant someone controlled them. Yun decided to use them to go to a true enemy. One case would be few, but there were more and more such situations. They were controlled by the same stranger who penetrated the island through the teleport. His goal was to lure Yuna into a trap when he rushes in pursuit of reptiloids. This stranger was Nisiyama Wugo, a tamer of monsters, who accepted the order for the murder of Yun. He was sure of the successful completion of the task, because with him there was a secret remedy that excludes failure. At that moment, Yun was already sitting on a tree, watching him, because he guessed that all this was a trap. Nevertheless, he did not understand how an outsider could get here, because for this, it was necessary that someone previously installed a magic circle for teleportation here. And this in turn meant that someone from Li clan was set up. A reasonable decision would be to report this and wait for reinforcement, but Yun removes the monitoring medallion and hides it. In addition, the help will not arrive soon, so he decides to figure it out himself using the technique of secrecy. Hiding his presence, the young man decides to quietly attack the tamer, and do it faster than he will have time to react. But at the time of the attack, the tamer notices him with the help of his familiar. Yun surprised the shogo. He did not expect that the illegitimate son of the clan Li would be so strong. In response, the boy says that rather this is a wimp. These words find the tamer by surprise, and he orders the reptilians to kill the boy. The young gentleman uses the sword of 7 stars. Using the 3rd movement, he easily straightens out with monsters. But suddenly he notes that something is wrong, as if the body was constrained by some invisible magical power. And this was true. The Sheo paralyzed it with the help of magic. placing the trap just in the place where Hyun moved. The tamer was happy. He managed to lure the young man into a trap, and now there was very little left. He applied the circle of higher magic, which blocks the heart center of mana, and now Hyun was powerless in front of him. But the Chaw did not yet know that Hyun had a completely different technique of mana management, where the center is not a heart. Having put Manu through the channels of the whole body, Hyun manages to get out of the trap using explosive magic. He immediately faces the Shogo, and he does not understand in bewilderment how the boy managed to escape. Now Hyun is in a more favorable position than his opponent. Chaw did not understand how the young man got out of the circle. He wanted to know about it, but Hyun did not tell anything. However, for the Wei, this no longer mattered. He had another plan. Suddenly, something strange began to happen nearby, from which Hyun felt uneasy. Suddenly, a giant leg appears in front of him and throws it with a powerful blow. The blow was so strong that the young man was saved by a tree standing behind, to which he literally stuck like a magnet. The incredible and unknown force weakened him so much that he could barely move. But one way or another, he needed to continue the battle in order to survive. Even though he was standing in front of him, the guard of the island, a turtle mountain, with incredible power. She was not an ordinary monster, but a creature of the third rank, and the young man did not understand how the third-rate tamer was able to subjugate it. And it really was like this. Chaw did not fully subjugate her, but with simple orders like killing him, the turtle coped. Therefore, he leaves them alone, and he runs away where his eyes look. Hyun needs to calm down and think. If the turtle is not under full control, all he needs is to kill the tamer. To survive, he will need an extreme elixir, which he prepared just for such a case. This elixir gives a huge surge of strength, but its side effects are extremely dangerous. It gives stability to the body, and also increases the supply of mana for a short time. Together with the elixir, he is going to use the technique that Gyon Ha taught him in case of extreme danger. The Denial of Heaven technique is a powerful technique that allows the enemy to inflict significant damage to the enemy. But even with her against the turtle, Hyun managed to stop her only for a short time. However, the young man also owned other techniques that can harm even such a powerful enemy. He is going to apply one of them. But the turtle also attacks in response, using his most terrible technique, a roar from which blood in the veins is crushed. The young man needs to dodge this attack at all costs, otherwise everything will be over. The turtle also radiates the waves of mana, immobilizing the enemy. But thanks to this, the dark energy of the young master opposes the frightening roar. Now he can move again, which means attacking. For his main attack, he needs limitless. Using a sword, he applies the first movement and a special technique, a dissecting demon. He manages to hit the turtle and beat off her attack. A huge stream of energy force of the turtle releases into the sky without hitting the young man. But dark energy has side effects. Because of it and the technique of Denial of Heaven, he temporarily loses strength. Until he lost consciousness, he has 10 seconds to find the tamer. Suddenly he notices a thread in a strange direction under him. She leads him far into the forest. Perhaps this is a trace of the Hyo. And Hyun is right. Because of his negligence, Hyo reveals his location. He does not even have time to understand what is happening, how a young man with a sword arises in front of him. Hyun put all his strength and rage in this attack to get the Shogo. And he succeeds. With a powerful blow, he seriously hurt the enemy. After this, he needs to urgently restore strength in order not to lose consciousness. He uses a potent nectar which his elder brother gave him, but still the body was too exhausted, and the boy loses consciousness. Opening his eyes, he notes that he is in some strange place where everything was white. Hyun began to think, is the Shogo really involved in this? His body seems to break into pieces, but it was not the worst. In this white room was not only he, but also another unknown creature. It said something about the dangerous creature found in the body of the boy. It hoped that Hyun would not wake up. It would be better for her. Suddenly it gives him purple honeycombs, saying that this is not for Yuna, but for him, and that this is the beginning of a new era. Out of the corner of the eye, Hyun notices the silhouette of a turtle mountain. Probably she was an unknown creature. But soon the turtle leaves, saying only that the boy needs to grow so that the new era does not absorb him. It is unconscious of him that is surprised by his brother's condition. Hyun was also surprised to see her. He certainly did not expect this. Using the mana control technique, he examines his body. Despite the terrible damage, its potential for accumulating mana has increased many times. It was enough to be shocked by the state of his brother, especially since he spoke about this in a very calm tone. It was a shame to Hyun that he got a stone of purple twilight, inside of which there were honeycombs that increased strength, manu, and immunity to poisons and curses. It was for this that he arrived at the Red-Blue Island, but the feeling of guilt still remained. And then unexpectedly they find the older brother Munjun. He came running here, learning about what had happened, and took the potion of mana with him to restore. Munjun was painful to look at the exhausted brother. He asked to grab them alone, and she left without objection. Munjun decided to be frank. If Yong had died, he would have spent his whole life on the destruction of the guilty. He also praised the boy. What he did is incredibly even by the standards of the clan Lee, but as his brother he does not approve of such actions. Hyun only replied that he did not know that everything would turn around that way. Otherwise he would have waited for his older brother. Munjun was glad to hear this. At least sometimes Hyun could appreciate his strength. Hyun asked to tell more about the tamer because he has the right to know. Munjun expected such a question, although he hoped for the opposite. Wugo was a former exorcist of the 5th rank from Japan, who consisted in the Audmarie Order, from where he was excommunicated for the practice of forbidden magic. The one who hired him, apparently, arrived on the island, waited until the turtle of the mountain fell asleep, and drew a circle of dark magic, so that everything looked like a boy killed a turtle. But it has not yet been possible to find the customer, and given that the shogo at death, it will be problematic to find out anything from him. Yun believes that, most likely, the goal was not he, but Munjun. In this case, they would begin to say about him that he did not notice the traitor in the clan and did not take the corresponding measures in time. And this would greatly harm his reputation in the family and Lee clan. Munjun agrees with Yuna and did not convince him of the opposite, claiming that everything was in order. He only said that several scratches will not hurt him much for reputation. But in any case, he should not leave the estate for a long time, so he should return. Before leaving, Yun suggested making a small deal. Yun would witness that the elder brother initially knew who the traitor was and wanted to expose him, and the young master acted on his orders. So they will give the impression that the deputy knew something that even intelligence did not notice. Munjun thought that his younger brother would be better if everyone recognizes the truth, but he denies this, since he would hate him even more and pay attention to him. In return, he wants to get permission to access the library for only 3 days. The older brother did not object and agreed to his adventure. Everything that was interested in Munjun, is he right? Thinking that Yun got out of this situation without him. But their dialogue interrupts the call from the Zhang department, so he needs to immediately return to the estate. Before leaving, he returns the boundless to Yun, whom he dropped, having lost consciousness. And he promises to pretend that he did not see this sword, and Yun in response calls him a dangerous opponent. Munjun went back to the estate and grabbed to Yun. She was wondering what room Yun would go to. 3 weeks have passed, and the rooms with the final test should be open. She proudly replied that she would go to the most difficult, an obsession. Yun decided that he would go to the inner struggle room. I did not remember such a room, but it seems that this is one of those that is near the shore. Such a decision disappointed her, because she thought that the farther the room is from the center of the island, the easier. She mistakenly believed that the difficulty of testing depends on the location of the room. But this did not worry the young man, because this did not change his decision. Yun at that time went in search of a room, and it was not so easy to find it. In a past life he accidentally found her here, and so he managed to stumble upon her again, the room of the inner struggle. To go there without a light source would be a big mistake. You can not only get lost, but also get into trouble. Although at first it seems that the cave as a regular wall is a dead end, but this is a deceptive impression. Behind this wall was hidden something special, hidden from human eyes. Behind her was the door that opened the passage into the room. But finding the door is not enough to open it. You need to shed a little blood. Then the door will open, and the air will be able to start the test. In the center of the room, which was like the palace, a sword was stuck. Finally, the young gentleman opened the door and was ready to complete the final test. To start the test, you need to shed some of your blood into the bowl next to the sword and say, "Lee Warrior." Lee came to go through the testing of his ancestors. I ask for permission. The internal struggle room offers a test that seems simple, but in practice is extremely complicated. To pass the test, you need to defeat yourself in battle. Attempts can be as much as you like, but the ultimate goal is to win. It will not be possible to leave the room until the warrior wins. Even if you just give up, this will not help. And then the moment came when the young master will need all his strength and mind, and it will not be at all as simple as it seemed to him at first glance. The clone instantly attacked him and blew his head from his shoulders. The young man did not even understand what happened, how he died so quickly. The room was present in the magic of illusions, so it is really impossible to die here. But you can get scared. But for Yun it was much more important how his exact copy was able to do this. The room has complete access to the abilities of heirs, and uses them with maximum efficiency. Yun did not know what he was actually capable of. Otherwise he could reflect the attack of illusion. But he had no time for thought. He had to attack him. However, it seemed much easier in my head than in reality. After each attempt there was a new one, and each time he died differently. It could be a blow to the stomach, a folded neck, or instant death. An attempt to try, it seemed that this continued eternity. There was already an 80th attempt, and Hyun, it seems, began to go crazy. But he did not want to give up. Instead, he decided to use his strongest aspects, for example, freedom of weapons. Complete unpredictability, moreover, his abilities were not limited. This time, the young gentleman was sure that he would succeed. With each battle, with each collision with their own strength, their movements were synchronized. Let it take a lot of time and effort, but it will be fruit. This will be the fruit of his efforts and determination to victory over himself. Once, Hyun will still be able to defeat himself no matter what. And it seems this moment has come. The illusion pierced his stomach with a sword. But this time, Hyun specifically fashioned in a blow to immediately counterattack. The young warrior used the ancient technique, the drushing demon, and dealt with his clone. With this, he went through a test, after which a family member is given the ability hidden in the blood. In a past life, he received the usual ability, strengthening, but this time he received a new, unknown ability to him. Meanwhile, the highest composition of the clan was already waiting for him at the exit, because the young heir was slightly delayed with the passage of the room. Tae-hong thought that the young man would get out of her today, and the density of mana began to hesitate, and the door of the room opened. A young gentleman came out of it, who was able to defeat himself and went through the name of the name. But his condition left much to be desired. He was completely exhausted, and as soon as the threshold crossed, he immediately fell. Tae-hong managed to catch him, very excited, seeing the boy in this state. But Hyun did not lose consciousness. Through pain and fatigue, he pronounced something. The young man asked for water and food, which was quite natural, given how much time he spent in the test room. Tae-hong was glad that the young heir survived and could speak, but at the same time, he was angry with him for his irresponsibility. Upon returning home, Yuna met his nanny, who was very worried about him because he survived so many tests, and now also in this state. The young man was tired and was not against taking a shower, and most importantly, to eat. Hyun was surprised that Gyon Ha had not been next to him. Ha grabbed that something happened during his absence. Gyon was hungry after she tried to resist the elder of the clan. But even so, she was only interested in how Hyun felt and how the test passed. The young man did not expect Gyon Ha was ready to suffer so much for him. She staged a scandal at the headquarters, the elder and older brother. Gyon Ha accused them of specifically arranged all these situations that were supposedly by chance on the island. She apologized to Young, because she thought that she would never see him again. In addition, training with him was especially valuable for her, and when she found out what was happening on the island, she felt as if she began to choke. At first, Hyun did not trust the aunt, but at some point began to perceive her as a native person. Therefore, he was grateful to her for the care and attention that she showed to him. He was strongly determined to pull her out of the dungeon, although Gyon Ha was against, because this could lead to problems. Hyun replied that everything was in order. He will not have to do anything. Soon they will be released anyway. Meanwhile, the head of the clan, Tae Shin, returned from the secret expedition. He returned just to the completion of the name of the name. For his absence, many different situations occurred, so he has a lot of work ahead. It was met by all the participants in the family Lee, without exception. Hyun thought that after the ceremony he became much stronger, but in the presence of his father, this whole force fades. The difference between them is like an abyss. Passing by, Tae Shin says that those who easily give up cannot be members of the clan, but only one of all those present looks at him with audacity. The chapter did not call the name, so everyone was interested in whom he was. Suspicions were only at his older brother, but only Hyun understood that it was about him. He tried to be more modest, but his father was still penetrating. Meanwhile, the final day of the naming ceremony has come. Today you will get their names. Lee clan rarely arranges such luxurious feasts, where many noble people gathered. These were noble people, from the young master of magic to the master of the ministry of Onsmerero. Hyun decided to stand aside, but Choi approached him. The butler handed him to him that Tae Shin wanted to see him and asked him to follow him. The young gentleman began to worry why his father calls him. Does he really have troubles? He was surprised when he saw that Munjun was also standing next to his father. Looking at them, Hyun guessed why his father called him. His guesses were confirmed. Tae Shin asked him to come just because of the case on the island. He asked his son to tell him everything that happened at the ceremony, how he met an outsider there, and how Munjun told him to arrest him. Tae Shin suspected that it was all Yuna's hands, and he did not deny. He confessed that he proposed a deal to his eldest brother, to divide the guilt for this incident in return for 3 days of access to the library. Father replied that only for his exploits on the island, he was ready to forgive this crazy adventure. But only this time. In the future, there will be no such concessions on his part. Munjun is also supposed to be punished, but after the completion of the feast. Leaving, he smiled at his younger brother so that he would not worry about him. But Hyun nevertheless realized his guilt before him, and that most likely, he had a problem through his fault. Tae Shin did not approve that the young man tried to lie to him, but for his exploits he will receive what Munjun promised him. In addition, He found the secret room of the internal struggle, and for this he also realies a reward. The hour has come for the final stage of the naming ceremony, of course. There will be the head of the clan Lee. He thanked all those present and asked the heirs to prepare. The first to receive his name will be the 8th heiress and the daughter of a grace. The chosen one of the sacred sword, she always illuminates the light surrounding her spirit. For this, she is given the name with Hyun, which means bright and successful. Hyun was grateful for such a choice and shone with joy. Now the turn of the 9th heir and son of Hyun has come. Around everyone reacted to him in disgust, despite his exploits. And yet it did not matter, because right now he will receive his name and place in the family. The young man is firm and vigilant, smart and adamant, like a blacksmith, turning a piece of ore into a dangerous weapon. Therefore for him there would be no name better than Chaw, which means iron. Chaw himself chose this name, because he wanted to be as strong as iron. But now for him it will gain a new meaning. Now he is a Chaw, and his goal is to become a patriarch of the clan Lee, and he will do everything to adequately inherit his father's place. And at that time, Gyon Ha raged in might and main in the dungeon, because she was not even allowed to the name of Chaw. In addition, he said that he would pull her out, but this is not like the truth. But then a phone call rang, on which the highest composition of the clan with the guards is usually associated. And for Gyon Ha, it was good news. It was finally released from the lattice. Its business will be decided later, but so far it can be free from custody. Gyon Ha was so happy that in joy accidentally knocked out the door to the dungeon. Near the exit, Chaw was already waiting for her and was glad to see her again, not behind bars. He really helped her get out of the dungeon, but at the same time he brought an interesting letter. She was interested in how Chaw managed to pull her out, but it was also interesting that in the letter it was written that Gyon Ha should receive the powers of the elder of the council, and is also appointed by the teacher of Chaw. Gyon Ha was pleasantly surprised by such a turn of events, because now Chaw is her official student. A lot of time has passed since that day. Chaw has been bent for 13 years, which means that it is time for him to join the cadet school of Lee. In his life, a new stage has come on the way to the formation of the strongest warrior. From this day, his cadet life will begin, but it will not look like the one that others had. As soon as the young man crossed the threshold of the entrance, all the attention immediately fell on him. Everyone was interested in what he would show this time, after what he demonstrated at the ceremony, although there were those who attributed his merits for luck. While everyone treated Hyun with respect because she was a legal heiress. But this did not interfere with their relationships. Be that as it may, they are brother and sister, and part-time rivals in good vein. Along with this, Hyun wanted to apologize for saying at the ceremony the fact that it was disappointed in it and called it a weakling, which is not worth it next to it. But Chaw has already forgotten about her words, so he replied that everything was in order. Hyun was glad that he did not keep her evil, but at the same time she said that he was simply small sometimes. She also heard that Gyon Ha was appointed by his teacher, and he is allowed to visit the library, but their dialogue is interrupted by the teacher's entrance speech. He announced that now there would be a division of participants into classes, and when they call the name of the participant, he stands in an even row opposite his instructor. All the children were nervous. Many wanted to get to the best class to avoid incidents. It was normal, because the study of the cadet lasts 3 years, and the division into classes plays a large role. In each academic year, 5 grades, and classes are divided into ranks. With Hyun, without any problems, it was identified in the 1st grade. It was clear as the day. And Chaw, of course, was defined in the 5th grade, the lowest rank of all. He suspected that it would be so, but did not think that he would have done so openly with him. The 5th grade, or the landfill, was determined their mediocrity and non-teaching, and the council of elders and coalitions of influential relatives by misses. Beck was engaged in selection. Chaw accepted this as a challenge, so he did not worry, but he seemed to be not happy with Hyun. She reacted as if she'd been sent to the 5th grade, and did not understand why she would not oppose such a decision. But Chaw replied that everything was in order, and she should not worry. The class was really a landfill. It contained mostly spoiled children who wanted everything at once, just because of the status of their parents. Meanwhile, an unfamiliar guy turned to Chaw, who, it seems, was not in a past life. It was Kim Khan, the son of a blacksmith who works for a respected clan Lee. For him, it was an honor to be with him in the same class. The young master was interested in why the Khan decided to get to know him. The boy replied that he heard people from the clan spoke of him, and was truly delighted with him. It was not like a lie, so Chaw did not mind getting along with him. Chaw asked Khan that he was thinking that he was determined in the 5th grade. Khan smiled and replied that this means that this is all that his skills reach. However, he is not going to sit back and will become better, because who knows that he is fraught with the future. Chaw was pleasantly surprised by the mood of the Khan, because they had a similar course of thoughts. In addition to the Khan, Gyon Ha wanted to make friends with the young heir. Around it became noisy. Other children also thought about going to make friends with Chaw, but for some reason were afraid. Ha was like a smile generator among the rest. It seemed that he was even sleeping and smiling. The fifth-grade instructor, Jong Ha, also came to introduce himself to the students to get acquainted with newcomers better. Chaw remembered him since his past life. He was as energetic and optimistic. In the past, he even gave him private lessons when he lagged behind the program. For 2 years, the head of the class was in Ha, and even though he was ashamed to admit it, he remained in this position for the 2nd year. But now it has come for an hour to choose a new older. Although they are cadets, they will have real combat missions, so the headman is almost a detachment commander. The instructor is responsible for the curriculum and classes, but the headman for everything else. To choose the older. In the 5th grade, it is customary to hold competitions, the winner of which will become the headman. The rules were as follows: only a physical battle, no magic, and also after each match a short break. Of course, there were those who did not like it, and among them was the young heir of Chaw. He was dissatisfied with the rules, as well as the way the cadets think, because this is a combat school of Lee. If they want to play school children, let them go to study at a civil school somewhere in the city. In Ha, he told him that he was judging them too strictly, because they just wanted to put things in order the way they used to. But Chaw insisted on his own and intended to make real warriors from the children. He competed with each of them, and he managed to defeat everyone without problems. Although there were a lot of them, it only exhausted Chaw. No one could much harm him. Ka was struck by how many Chaw could win alone. He also realized that he would fight the next against the young heir. The boy was really excited because he understood that he had almost no chance of defeating Chaw. Chaw seemed to be at a completely different level compared to other students. Nevertheless, in Ha, he decided to fight the young heir, despite fear. Ha did not understand why Cholas went so far, because it was just a competition without rewards and honors, as in a regular cadet school, and not some Shaolin. Chaw was very exhausted to such an extent that he barely held his sword. But even so, he was not afraid to fight in Ha. To some extent, he understood the young heir, because before he was also desperate and wanted victory at all costs. And then I realized that it is also possible to adapt and make concessions. It is to be an adult, and so you can live. But be that as it may, simply wanting to defeat the opponent, it will not work to defeat him if there is not enough strength. So it was in the case of Ha. Chaw was significantly superior to him in martial arts. Chaw struck him a strong blow and it seems broke his wrist to the young man. On this, the competition ended as he thought. But Ha was a different opinion and was not intended to give up. In addition to his right hand, he also has a left one. However, this did not particularly help him, because the difference in the strength between them did not disappear anywhere. Chaw defeated all the students, and now he has become the head of the class. The young heir made a small speech about the fact that in order to protect himself and everything that is dear to him, he must tirelessly fight. Does anyone else have such a life? This is Chaw and called the real struggle for life in himself. After the competition, the teacher came up to Chaw and told him that this was already too much. The children received a number of injuries. But Chaw did not care, because if they want to survive in the Lee clan, for this it should be a trifle. Gyon Ha was uneasy from the words of the boy and the tone in which he said everything. But Chaw replied that there are very few such good people as a teacher. Gyon Ha is kind, but he should not forget that he works with the cadets of Lee clan, and if the student came out of the way, the teacher must return him to the right path. After yesterday, Chaw felt pain in his whole body. It seems that he still overdid it. Some students looked at him with a wolf, but no one averted their eyes. It inspired hope in him. After yesterday's competitions, few people wanted to talk to him. Only insults came to him. But still there were those who accepted the defeat with dignity, such as a Khan. He came early because he did not want to be late after Cholol defeated him. But he also had some questions for the young heir that he wanted to ask. Khan wanted to know how to become as strong as Chaw. Chaw replied that he was not yet at that level to teach someone, but noted that the Khan had good vision and reaction. Yesterday, he managed to dodge 3 times from his finites, which means that his vision is his strength. The Khan should be learned more complex techniques than just gross power. Having honed them, he will notice how much he has changed. After yesterday with Chol, I also spoke in Ha, on which it seemed that there was no living place. But the young man did not want to miss the lesson, and then listened to Chaw about how miserable and weak he is. Chaw was pleasantly surprised watching how students change and adapt. Meanwhile, the teacher announced that the 5 students simply did not come. The 4 had overturned. As a result, there were only 11 people in the classroom. Gyon Ha was painful to look at the appearance of the disciples. They were all unfamiliar and wanted to relax. In addition, after Chaw's arrival, the atmosphere changed. The usual children turned into small, frightened animals as soon as a predator appeared. Today, according to the plan, he had to assess their level, but the state of the students would not allow him to do this. Therefore, today's training will be easy. This will be just a test of physical condition. The rest of the children were surprised by this decision of the teacher. Before he gave them a rest, but now he said to train. And although the training was planned as easy, the assessment of the physical condition lasted 10 hours. But this was only the first part. Then there was a lesson in pairs under the leadership of Chaw. He introduced himself to the students as a new headman, and suddenly someone understood. Earlier, the headman was in Ha, and as he said yesterday, the headman obeys only the instructor and is of great responsibility. Therefore, training with him will be harsh, and those who do not want to work can leave. Of course, not everyone liked this, and Kim Bo a dream opposed Chaw. Chaw, however, replied that he did not mind getting into battle with everyone who wanted, and if he could inflict at least one strong blow to him, he would cross the elder. In the meantime, it is better to start classes. The students crashed into couples, but only 6 were able to fight. The rest immediately surrendered. The training was difficult and greatly exhausted the students, after which the opinion of Choli was deteriorated at times. Behind them, they began to discuss him, saying that the lessons turned into a real hell, and that it would be better if he did not appear. Khan opposed them, although he was also tired and exhausted after all. No one was even able to strike Chol. They also asked the opinion from Ha. Doesn't he think how they were? Because last year everything was cool, but in Ha he denies this. Everything was so cool that he remained for the second year. The young man says that if he does not change this year, then until the end of his life he will remain a miserable inconsistent. So he will try to become stronger. He is trying to convey to them that Chaw is also trying to make real warriors out of them, and not just breaks into them. In Ha, he inspired the speech of a young heir about his struggle. Perhaps for him this is a chance to change for the better. Meanwhile, Chaw continued to study mana management techniques, and this time he tried to transform Manu into an object. But again it did not work. He could not clean the aura. She immediately crumbled. Gyon Ha did not even think that such a problem would arise after reaching 3 stars. If she had reliable sources about ancient ways to use mana, she might be able to find a way out. Chaw also had problems. He still could not read the memories of the boundless, something only managed to find out in the library. The black dragons were the horror of ancient Korea. Even the monsters were afraid of them. They killed the best generals of the empire, and the heroes gathered to seal the dragons of Mount Mangui in the north. For this feat, the emperor gave them the lands. The heroes, inspired by the generosity of the emperor, poured the only sword in their kind, boundless. Chaw accidentally found the history of his origin and was very surprised. Meanwhile, Chaw has reached the stage of the formation of the aura. The fact that he independently moves to achieve 3 stars was a miracle. One way or another, soon they will find a way to overcome an obstacle with a crumbly aura. You just need to think. Chaw was interested in what would happen when he reaches 3 stars. Gyon Ha replied that then he will be able to use the technique of Ganchi, magic with the help of aura, but its development will take a lot of time. Gyon Ha, in turn, was interested in how Cholol has been learning, because recently he was constantly tired. She offered her help if it would be necessary, but Chol did not know how she could help. But it seems Gyon Ha Hyun has already developed a plan for how to help his beloved nephew. Chol suspected that her idea would be very strange, but not so. Today in the cadet school there will be a special lecture on mana techniques. She will be held by Elder Gyon Hyun from the Scientific Institute of the Lee clan. Gyon Hyun was glad to such a performance and a warm meeting by students and teachers. Therefore, she decided not to hesitate and immediately proceed to classes, starting with a lecture. After a boring lecture, she plans to teach cadets an improved version of the iron line technique developed by the Institute. Jong-yo thought that a lecture is the whole lesson, but Gyon Hyun said that now there would be the most important part of the lesson, so the students should be more attentive. Usually, the direct heirs of the clan Lee receive full support from the family, but not in the case of Chol, so Gyon Ha helped him. If everything works, its energy potential will double. Jong Ho asked the cadets to break into pairs to train with mana control techniques. In Ha, he approached Chol and invited him to practice together if he did not mind. Ka immediately said that he would not give the handicap to the young heir. Chol was not against it and was glad to hear it, answering that he would not let him first hit him. Their battle was interesting to observe all the cadets, including Gyon Ha and Jong Ho. Gyon Hyun was proud of a boy and saw herself in her childhood. Out of the corner of her ear, she heard the other cadets impolitely speak of Cholu, saying that although he is illegitimate, he is still higher than them in status, and his indicators are many times better. After all, they also did not cool, so why they were worse than him? Gyon Ha Hyun interrupts their discontent. She was extremely unpleasant to hear this about Chol, because now he is not only her nephew, but also a respectable student. The children understood their mistake and apologized for gross words addressed to Chol. But Gyon Ha was still unhappy with their behavior, because they know little about the young man in order to respond to him. It also decided to express his opinion. He claimed that they also worked without turning their hands, but they were written off from accounts as if they were no one. He justified their weak skills by the fact that they grew up in different families. But Gyon Ha denies his statements, saying that he does not understand everything, but only seeks excuses. After all, few knew what really the life of Chaw in comparison with this. Their life and study was just a kindergarten. But Bo Sleep still did not understand how the life of Chaw is different from them. In his opinion, there really is no difference. The young man constantly speaks of the need for struggle, but he was simply born to others. Therefore, Bo Sun was interested in what the young heir was doing, so he decided to follow him. But the cadets were worried about whether it was possible to stagger through the territory of the Corps, but Bo Dream convinced them that yes, because Chaw lives in a hostel for ordinary people, and not for direct heirs. Therefore, today he wanted to prove his innocence and not allow Chaw to command them. Bo Dream and several more children were waiting for Chaw near the entrance to the laboratory. Compared to him, they were not enthusiastic and wanted to go home as soon as possible, because they were very tired after training. Therefore, they gradually began to go home, leaving Bo Sun alone. Meanwhile, Chaw left the laboratory and planned to go home, so Dream thought. But Chaw went to the training room for direct heirs to continue to train. Loud and fierce cries were heard from the hall. The cadets even thought that he was being killed there. Therefore, everyone except Bo Sun decided to stop surveillance of him, admitting that the young heir was really strong in words. But Bo Sleep insisted on his own, and continued to believe that he and the young master is equal. The other cadets decided to leave, leaving him alone. Bo Dream, on the other hand, intended to prove at all costs that he was not mistaken. He continued to pursue him until the barracks, and finally Chaw went to bed. But then Bo Sun was discovered. He did not expect such an outcome of events. He was found by a passing guard. He was already used to the fact that usually every night a young master walks here, but did not expect his friend would be with him. But Bo Dream said that this was not so. He just went out of need. But the guard replied that the cadets were forbidden to walk at night, so he better go home. At this time, the light of Chaw appeared in the room of Chaw. Bo Sleep was surprised, because the clock has already 2 nights. Having accepted his defeat, he went home. In the morning of the same day, Bra was a dream noticed Chaw in a training field for direct heirs. He was surprised when he saw a young man, because on the watch only 5 in the morning. In his appearance, it was clear that he was very tired, even if, by the right of birth, he had the best physical data. He was surprised how he could be healthy if he was sleeping for 3 to 4 hours a day, while Bo Dream, coming to the barracks, looks at the TV set or plays the prefix. Chaw was also surprised when he saw him here at such a time. Bo Dream asked if he was tired, and the young man understood everything. He suspected that yesterday someone followed him, and it was precisely the sleep. But Bo Sleep is justified, saying that the young gentleman from birth receives all the support, so he was born not like them. Chaw replied that he lives like this from early childhood, only sometimes allowing himself a little more sleep. Of course, he is tired. Bo Dream did not understand why the young man drives himself like that. But Chaw only answered him that he himself understands everything. Bo Dream really understood everything perfectly, and that the difference in their strength is not because of who was born in which family. Meanwhile, Tae Shin instructed the butler to collect information about the dungeons, making them the final task in the exam. But it was not enough, because it was about the dungeons of the 7th and 8th level, and they are dangerous for them. Tae Shin needs such warriors who can survive in any conditions. In addition, Choi had another news associated with the 9th heir and his cadet. Hearing this, Tae Shin once again convinced that Chaw was looking at this world differently, and he recognizes the look of a man who knows how to be trampled and devoid of everything. But leading and making people change is a completely different skill. Tae Shin was interested in whether the boy could lead people. Therefore, the chapter orders to change the complexity of the exam. Besides, the 8th heiress is also studying there, so the standards must be increased for everyone. On weekends, as a rule, no one trains, so Jung Ho was surprised when he came to the training field. It was still an early morning, and the cadets already trained and fought among themselves. The cadets were so surprised at the coming of the teacher, because they did not expect him to come. Jung Ho asked to call the rest of the guys who remained in the barracks. He wants to make a small ad. The teacher announced that the interim exam was decided to spend earlier than the planned time. Therefore, all cadets are given a week of rest. These will be their last holidays this year. Jung Ho also wanted to remind them that it was necessary to support at least a little training during this period. But the Lord of the Cadets spoke everything for himself. Therefore, he was sure that everyone would cope with the exam and wished them good luck. Chaw was surprised by a sudden rest before the exam. Perhaps because of this, the exam will be made even more difficult. Even after the teacher announced the holidays, the cadets still did not leave the training field, waiting for Chaw. The rest were interesting what he would do during the holidays. Chaw replied that everyone decides for himself why he should ask him. In addition, they can safely enjoy the vacation. He will not force them to train during the holidays. The cadets thought the other way around, that the headman would force them to train to exhaustion, even on vacation. This slightly surprised Chaw. Training, but rest is also important, moreover, before an intermediate exam. Therefore, Chaw, like the headman, told them to rest and was sure that even having said this, the children would still not relax very much. The week of the holidays before the exam began, and the cadets were sure that everyone could pass the exam. Meanwhile, Chaw went to the Gyon Ha laboratory to continue research. She heard that he had a vacation, but instead of rest, for some reason he came to her when she had a lot of work. But Chaw replies that when he came, she watched stupid videos on the phone. Gyon Ha says that the video is not stupid at all, because Hamina finally admitted the chairman, and he was cured of leukemia. But the young man was interested in something else, whether it was true that the exams were postponed by order of his father. Indeed, in this case, the exam will be more difficult, and the young heir must take a breakthrough in the mana management. And for this, he needs to get access to the memories of the boundless, which he still has not succeeded. Next to Chaw lay a stack of pieces of paper, in which there was information about monsters according to the laboratory, and Gyon Ha did this. The young man accidentally touches the stack, and all the papers fall to the floor. Considering them, he notices something interesting for himself. The main difference between ancient and modern martial arts is the goal. There is a theory that in ancient times they were intended primarily to fight monsters. It seems that this is exactly what Chaw had. Boundless need a goal. Chaw realized that it was, and rising sharply, he ran to try a new theory. Gyon Ha, he promised to tell everything later, and now he needs to run to train. Gyon Ha was shocked by what was happening, and that now in her office there was a mess around 100 papers. First of all, Chaw needs to introduce his opponent, a giant monster, many times stronger than him. It is huge, and the young man needs a technique that has great efficiency, a simple blow, from which it is impossible to dodge. Aesthetic but effective techniques are not suitable for this purpose. Here is the clear goal of the dissecting demon technique. Killing muffled monsters is the main goal of the reception dissecting demon, and Chaw's theory was confirmed. Boundless revealed a new memory to him. This time, the young heir will be able to reveal the secrets of his sword. The Boundless transferred him to his memories, but now this is not a battlefield with a giant monster. It was a training site, and the situation was different from the one that was in the first memory. Chaw noted that there was a person on the training site, whom he had already seen somewhere. He watched him training. His speed of blows was simply incredible. In addition, every time his weapon changed, his aura changed. And this was not he did, but Boundless. The young man became even more interesting. But then Chaw hears another voice. More than one person trained on the field. Another stranger who spied on his training went to that warrior. He was wondering what techniques he had already invented. The warrior has constantly trained since I received a new sword, but has not yet come up with the names of the technicians. These were still raw developments. Chaw came even closer to better consider what they were hanging about there. But his presence seemed to notice the same warrior, and thought that someone else had come with the stranger. He replied that he had come alone. Chaw was tensing at this time because I did not want to run into trouble. Sparring began between the two soldiers, and it seems that it was just a friendly battle. But Chaw was surprised by such a quick course of events. The memories of the Boundless did not cease to surprise him. He also noticed a distinctive feature of one of the warriors, his eyes and hair. The eyes were yellow and the hair was black. It was a distinctive feature of Lee clan. Soon the week of the holidays took place, and after them an intermediate exam began. The exam will take place far from the usual area, behind the barrier, which shares a safe and dangerous area. A long time ago, not far from the Pacific Ocean, a giant crack was formed, which was then nicknamed the Blue Hole, an unknown space that was not even officially investigated properly. And from there, monsters of different species and strength began to appear. For a long time, humanity fought with them and tried to return its territory. However, there were lands that were not mastered. People called these areas unknown or dangerous zones. Cadets are now sent to one of these zones to pass the exam. But in dangerous areas, there was another feature. The further they were from the barrier, the more deserted landscapes became, so the Khan said. But Chaw answers him that they are still inside the barrier, and in settlements near dangerous zones the level of development is significantly lagging behind. Chaw, like no other, was known, because in a past life he lived there, although not for long. A group of cadets arrived at the destination. It was an unknown dungeon in a dangerous zone, so you need to be extremely careful. Zhang wanted everyone and offered to defeat a small camp in this place. They will check supplies, and then begin the test. Supervision warriors will only guard the parking lot so that the monsters do not crush the bus. Everything else depends only on the cadets. Their life is now completely in their hands. But do not worry. because in which case the teacher will always provide them with maximum support. From that moment on, the command passes into the hands of the elders of the class, Chaw. He immediately told the other children that this exam is many times more difficult than the previous ones, in particular because of him. So if someone wants to leave, then it is better to do it now and quickly. After all, this exam is not just a typical assessment of young children, but a cunning dungeon called Forest of Spiders with human faces. Here, the web is spread everywhere so that the monsters can determine the location of the subject, and one of the tasks on the exam was to photograph a spider with a human face inside the dungeon. Chaw was surprised when none of the cadets wanted to quickly leave the exam. The children, on the contrary, were confident in themselves and their abilities and completely trusted the young master. Therefore, they are ready to fight with Chaw side on the side and listen to his orders. Chaw was glad of such an atmosphere and class mood. This significantly improved his position. So do not hesitate, and first you need to check the connection and supplies, and then go to the dungeon. Spiders with human faces are extremely cunning and behave like ants or bees. Chaw recalled once again that their main task is to fix the movement of a spider with a human face in the forest, which is at least 10 years old. And from that moment he transfers his command in Ha. Ka was surprised by his decision, because he did not fully understand that the young heir had in mind. Chaw replied that from this moment he would move further and become a bait. From these words the cadets came to a stupor and, as if for a moment, were speechless. They were shocked by his plan and subjected his expediency to issues. But Chaw moved forward, clearing the paths of spiders along the path of which there was just a lot in the forest. The young man killed them in order to spread the hazard of danger, so that even more spiders gathered on him. And he succeeded. Now it remained to wait for him to be captured, because spiders with human faces bring nutritious prey to their nests and feed the larvae. To become this nutritious prey, you need to prove that this production has great force. Chaw, without any backthought, filled the sword by mana and prepared to deliver a blow to the spiders. He used his most powerful technique, a dissecting demon. His actions angered spiders, and after a second there were more than 100 of them. And they all rushed at the young man, taking him for a very valuable prey. This was the plan of Chaw, which is why he went alone. The young man lost consciousness, and waking up, he found himself in an unknown place. Chaw was inside the cocoon. Everything as he planned. His plan worked. The stomach was slightly swollen due to the poison of spiders, but otherwise the body feels perfectly, and it decides to hide his presence with the help of technology. Having got out of the web, Chaw began to think, if it is a nest, then there should be a larva. Cutting a little cocoon, he saw that his guesses were confirmed. There were many cocoons around. It would be simply impossible to catch so much in a day. This surprised Chaw because they should have been eaten for a long time, so why they are still here. But soon he saw an explanation. In the center was a giant cocoon, which was significantly different in size from others. Suddenly he sharply began to pulsate, as if someone was about to get out. He resonated with the dark energy that was inside the Chaw. And so the wall of the cocoon exploded, and someone began to slowly appear, it seems, something to say. Inside the cocoon was the Queen of Spiders with a human face, which is a monster of the 5th level. Chaw was surprised that a 6th monster in the dungeon could speak human language. But no, it did not open my mouth, which means that dark energy can read thoughts. While Chaw was thinking, the queen suddenly attacked him, destroying his cocoon. The young man no longer had a place to maintain secrecy technology. The queen was unhappy with the presence of the boy in her dungeon. She said that she was awakened by what was inside the young man. This brought her into even greater rage, and she wanted to kill the boy as soon as possible. The monster began to make a piercing sound that only a high-level predator can make. But fortunately for Chaw, this did not act on him thanks to the suppression of the enemy mana. The queen did not understand how he was able to suppress her mana, and this brought her into even greater rage. Meanwhile, something strange happened in the forest. Smoke appeared. A small part of the forest was undermined by magic explosive shells, and soon the fire began to spread throughout the forest. The Queen of the Spiders was furious. A forest that was calm for decades now burned in fire. Chaw was glad that his plan worked, and the other cadets were able to set fire to the forest. While Chaw was in the nest of the dungeon itself, the cadets set fire to the trees on his signal. And soon they began to advance to the nest. After half an hour, they will be in place to help the young master. All this time was provided to them by Gyon Ha, who was on the basis of the camp. The queen was furious, seeing how some boy circled her around her finger. She ordered the remaining spiders to protect the forest from the fire. She will deal with the boy herself without their help. The queen was furious that she could not defeat her human child, and did not understand why he was so sure that his friends would have time to get to him. She was sure that Chaw could not do anything to her, but the young master replied that he should not underestimate him. It has come for Chaw to show everything that he learned over the years, as well as the ability that he gained after the ceremony. Meanwhile, the cadets continued to run, Some of them continued to blow up shells to lure spiders, and the other part provided the retreat path. Bo Sleep was a little insecure whether they could just break into the nest, because there, it seems, something happened. But Ha Ha assured him that they were acting according to the plan. The forest continued to glow at an incredible speed. A flame raged around the nest. The queen continued to attack Chaw, but he continued to hold on, ignoring her attacks. The young man continued to hold concentration and simply looked at the monster. It's all about the demonic eyes. They allow you to see the hidden stream of numerous forces and help to avoid deadly injuries. But there were difficulties. Because of the rupture in force, he could not completely evade her attacks. Fortunately, the queen had just hatched, so she did not fully control her body, so that the young man could sometimes treat himself. But he had only one chance, one attempt to defeat the queen. To do this, he used the Manbeno sword and the movement of an infinite change. And with the help of the technique, the chi procation struck a powerful blow with lightning on the queen's body. There was a huge flash at the scene of the blow. It seemed that after that, nothing was left of the monster. Perhaps it would be so if Chaw could hit deeper. As he thought, it will not work to cut such thick skin from one blow. The queen was at a loss and rage from the arrogance of the young man. She wanted to get what was inside him, to restore the body and force him to suffer forever. Anger and pain from damage overwhelmed her, and she began to attack Chaw. The young man could no longer use demonic eyes to evade her magic threads. One of them grabbed his hair, and the queen used the submission technique. After that, his mind began to go crazy. It only sounded in his head. Submit. She began to laugh and rejoice at her victory, looking at the weakened young man. But suddenly something was wrong with her. She did not understand what happened, why the body began to hurt so sharply. The queen was in unbearable pain, and in front of her stood a young man who managed to break her thread. He used the remnants of forces to apply demonic eyes and repel her attacks, but this was no longer necessary. During this time, the fire got to the nest and began to burn the queen's body, because spiders and insects are extremely vulnerable before fire. Meanwhile, a group of cadets was already running to the young master to pull him out of the nest. They apologized for being late, to which Chaw jokingly replied that it seems they would have to go through some special training on returning home. The fire spread at an incredible speed, so it was necessary to leave the nest and forest as soon as possible. Meanwhile, most of the classes have already passed the exam, and only the 5th grade was delayed, although someone said that they returned half an hour ago. Some began to think that they had already abandoned their assignment as the 4th grade did, but Gyon Ha came here. He apologized for being late, explaining that several cadets were injured, and they had to be sent to the hospital, but now he was ready to provide a report. The 5th grade task was to catch an adult individual in the forest of spiders with a human face, but during the assignment, an unusual phenomenon took place, and it was necessary to collect information for preparation. The 5th grade entered the dungeon and divided into 4 groups, releasing 132 magic shells, and in a collision with monsters, 52 shells were used. This was angry with one of the teachers, because the initial mission was to photograph an abnormal phenomenon and not burn the forest. Is Gyon Ha trying to present this bombardment as a successful execution of the task? But Gyon Ha did not understand the indignation of one of the teachers, because the task was completed. Soon, Chaw joined them, who brought the video and apologized for being late. He explained that the original record was damaged, and that was all that managed to restore. Gyon Ha was surprised when the young man brought a video with the task. Hyun was also surprised by the 5th grade actions, because it was not necessary to blow up the dungeon and climb into the nest. But Chaw replied that this was the most reliable way. After watching the video, one of the teachers admitted that all this is true, and using shells is like carrying the canister with butter into a burning house. Was this plan really true? Chaw replied that he simply acted most effectively, and the standard approach would hardly allow him to cope. The teacher noted that this was not an accident, although it looked like this, but everything was part of the plan. Chaw knew exactly what he was doing, and what the result will be. The rest of the teachers also noted that the plan of the young master was so radical that it is difficult to compare him with something. It was difficult to give this an assessment, however, since it was possible to do without casualties. Everything is in order. For this quarter, only the 5th grade received the highest score. The report on the end of the exam was also provided to the office of the head of the family Lee. During the exam, 32 people died, and 78 were injured. There were no problems, since the contract was prescribed a refusal of responsibility. The victims are guaranteed the full payment of medical expenses. Choi also provided Tae Shin with complete information about each dungeon that he managed to study. The head of the clan was surprised when he watched a video with a 5th grade test, noticing some oddities in him. The Forest of Spiders is a dangerous dungeon located at the northern tip of the province of Kanvondo. The video mainly captured only a spider with a human face. Choi also notified the master that the video was restored, but it seems that he was simply edited. Tae-shin agreed with the opinion of the butler, and was sure that this was the work of the ninth heir. Mr. asked Choi what he was thinking about it. The butler replied that this was a great achievement, to cope with such a difficult task with the help of his mind, but he was disturbed by the fact that the young man did not use the standard strategy. Tae-shin also noticed this, so he asked Choi what he was thinking about it, and whether he noticed these oddities. Going beyond, non-standard. These things show the courage of the boy, and you can create something new only thanks to well-learned strategy standards. The fact that not only the cadets, but also the teacher without objections followed this plan, confirms the leadership qualities of the youngest son. After that, Tae-shin gave the order to increase the complexity of the level of assessments, including this one. Gradually, other children will begin to pay attention to the youngest. A few months later, an exclusive training site of the 5th class of the Cadet Corps. Yesterday, young cadets returned from the final assessment this year. That is why Chaw gave the children a small respite. The last assessment this year is completed, and everyone wants to relax. But do not forget that there is still an examination for an increase. And Chaw will not allow someone from the class to fail him. Therefore, training continues, and today it is worth starting with physical training. Chaw was glad to watch the cadets become stronger, not only physically, but also morally. Instead of being upset due to their shortcomings, they learned to compensate for them. During training, the teacher Gyon Ha granted the young master. He notified him that soon there would be an announcement regarding the improving exam, so he needs to be present there. Entering the office, Chaw immediately noticed that someone was calling him. There she was, already sitting with Hyun, and asked him to approach her. There was a free place next to her, and she wanted to talk about something about her younger brother. She noted that the 5th grade coped quite well at the exams. Chaw also noticed that the first showed himself no worse. Hyun accepted his words as praise and replied that they were good in the exam. And after starting to say that she did not ask her to praise, with Hyun also told him that the future exam is a real headache. Recently, the 6th sister and the 7th brother were called to the mother's room, after which it was a rumor that they were both to meet with the cadets. Chaw asked if they were trying to knock him out of the struggle for an increase. With Hyun, she continued that, of course, this was not allowed, but it was precisely from that and worse, because you do not know what to expect, and called Chaw strange. But Chaw replied that if she wanted to warn him, it was too late, because the problems began with the very first assessment. There were cases when they either provided poor equipment or someone intentionally missed educational material, creating discrimination. Chaw also heard that someone recently turned to Bo-sun. With Hyun, he told Chaw that this time she, along with the class, was going to honestly compete with him and win, as well as get an assessment above him and force Chaw to call her older sister. But Chaw did not care because he did not understand why he was so focused on this. Meanwhile, the teacher entered the office to make an important announcement. He said that today the assessment of this year has been completed, and now he will tell the details and the schedule of increasing cadets this year. The result of the increase in cadets will be determined following the results of assessments during the year and exams, and this exam will be held in the Y7 gates, located about 3 kilometers north of Seesan. Chaw was surprised that the exam would take place in the gates. He expected that the exam for raising would be different, but not like that. The teacher continued that there will be named signs inside the gate, and the cadets will also have nominal signs. The loss of its plate is equated with the failure of the exam and death. There are no other rules. The main task is to collect as many signs as possible. Chaw understood the main purpose of the exam. All that is needed is to receive personalized signs, steal and survive. If you lose your own, then consider it dead. The number of signs with names determines the result of the exam. But to be considered dead is also a trap. Even if someone stole a nominal plate, no one will know about it. Therefore, all that is needed is to steal someone else's plate with a name or get hidden. In addition, the exam will be present in the exam. The exam is isolated from the outside world. Therefore, no matter what happens with an illegitimate child, there will be no evidence. This is a great opportunity to get rid of Chaw, but also a good chance for him. Meanwhile, some family participants were also preparing for the exam, but in their own way, such as, for example, the 7th child of the clan, Jihawk. As well as the 6th child of the family, Lee is the Salt, which had a very bad character. She spent contempt with all family members, including Hyun, disliked her for her reasons. Salt was interesting what Jihawk was thinking about the orders of the mother related to his younger brother. Jihawk noted that this is a great opportunity to check his younger brother. Salt hated Chaw for the fact that he was a bastard, while having the title of a direct descendant. Therefore, she, as an older sister, should teach him a couple of lessons and put him in his place. The ranking exam is mandatory to go to the next class, and now it takes place as part of hunting for named signs and gates. Khan told Changol that the gates are reliably guarded. Chaw answered him that this was for the calm of people, or perhaps a precaution due to experiments and investigations. Moreover, there were much fewer people in the exam than Chaw suggested. The rest were mocking the Chaw, considering him worse than himself. But for the young master it did not matter, because one day he can prove to everyone who he really is. Now it is important to focus on an exam to increase the rank, and together with the rest of the cadets from the 5th grade, successfully pass this test. Meanwhile, Salt A expected news about the results of the exams, simultaneously eating the cupcakes that Jihawk left in his office for guests. Jihawk replied that not so much time had passed since the moment all the sabotages entered, so you still need to wait. Salt was looking forward to good news that Chaw could be eliminated because she hated him, as well as like him. In addition, Unu promised to reward them well if everything works out as it should, but Jihawk tormented doubts about the smoothness of the plan. Jihawk remembered the words of Munjun that Chaw was not an opponent. Then he joked from this, but something else was bothering. And at that moment he received an SMS with the results of the exam. Jihawk was so surprised that he was speechless, and Salt was no longer an interest. She grabbed the phone from the younger brother to see what was there. According to the preliminary results of the exam, 21 people are excluded, 15 dropped out, and the entire 5th grade of the first year successfully survived. Salt was furious. Was it really none of the second year? Olds could knock out one little boy. Jihawk was shocked by this news. It seems he really underestimated his younger brother. Meanwhile, 2 guys who hunted exclusively for Chaw themselves became his goal. They tried to hide in the cave, hoping that the young man could not find them. But their hope was broken when a sword suddenly flew into them. Chaw found them and decided to teach them, breaking his hand to one of them. The second attacker tried to speak Chaw, saying that even if he is a direct heir, he cannot just do what he wants. But Chaw did not care about his chatter about who and what could do. After all, if he directs the knife to direct descendants, he must pay for it. It was successfully finished with another batch of attackers, but it would be difficult to deal with them alone with Chaw. Friends cadets helped him, and having dealt with these 2, the young master asked Ha to join the Khan, because probably someone was still aimed at them. Therefore, Chaw continued himself, saying Ha to get acquainted with the names on his list and continue to collect nominal signs, because the most important thing in this exam is the number of collected nominal signs. So the young man formed a hypothesis whether he can find signs using demonic eyes. And his hypothesis turned out to be true. With the help of demonic eyes, he managed to find nominal signs. Now the Chaw exam has become even easier, and it will not be difficult for him to collect the right number of signs. In addition, it was a great opportunity to establish control over a new ability. Chaw was so carried away that it seems to have collected too many signs, even too much. Now you can be sure that he passed the exam. But the most important thing, now he will not have to train the demonic eye. Since the exam almost ended, the fights did not stop from dawn. Meanwhile, Chaw found with Hyun, whom he had tried to avoid before. However, it seems that if she continues, she will begin to annoy him. With Hyun thought she could surprise her younger brother with her sudden appearance. But Chaw knew that she was following him, so he was not surprised by her appearance, even despite the fact that crowds of other cadets hunted for a young master, not to notice a Han for him. In any case, with Hyun, it was set up to fight with a younger brother in an equal battle in the exam in order to prove his strength. And if she manages to defeat her younger brother, then he will call her an older sister. Chaw agreed, but he was interested in what would happen if he won. In the case of his victory, he will call him his older brother with Hyun, but for Chaw, it was more like a psychological attack than a reward for victory. The battle between the 2 heirs began. Hyun was sure that now she would be able to defeat her younger brother, but there was little confidence. After the successful completion of the improving exam, the assessment system became even more stringent, and the exam of this semester, in which Chaw participated along with 2 direct heirs, became a hot topic for discussion. The cadets actively discussed who was the first in the exam. Most thought that it would be with Hyun or someone else from sorties. Nobody even wanted to recognize the victory of Chaw and other cadets from the 5th grade. But still, the young master managed to become the best in the exam and increase his rank. Chaw did not think that he would receive the highest common rank among everyone in the exam. Perhaps if Hyun coped better, but Chaw took all her nominal signs for himself after the victory in sparring. Gyon Ha also congratulated Chaw on the victory, because getting to the number of the best cadets of the corps is a great achievement. The achievements of the young master were glad and other cadets of the 5th grade. The next one will receive his rank in Ha, which also showed itself in the exam. Ha raised his rank and took 13th place in the ranking. He was glad of this, because for the first time in 2 years, he managed to increase his rank. Bon Song was also increased to a new rank, taking the 24th place in the ranking. The Khan worked hard to get an increase in his first academic year. He managed to take the 34th place in the ranking, which disappointed him a little. But Khan was not going to give up, because this is only the beginning. He will become as strong as Chaw. Bo Dream was also determined to show himself in the best form, because he decided to change himself in order not to be a burden and lead a dishonest life. In Ha was the same opinion. He would become even stronger and will not lose Chaw. Chaw became not only a good teacher for cadets, but also an example to follow. The young master could not even believe that everything was finally over, and the guys were able to increase their ranks. He also congratulated the guys with an increase, saying that they were all well done and trained hard. Chaw wanted to do personal training with those who were not raised, but this fortunately did not happen. However, the second year will be much more complicated, and there will be even more wishers who want to break them to pieces. But this did not worry the cadets. They were sure that now all difficulties in their path would easily pass. Chaw was the same opinion. Let everyone not like him at first. He was able to lead people. Meanwhile, with Hyun, she refused to recognize the defeat on the exam. But Chaw did not care, because he did not even understand that she did not recognize this. Hyun called him an impudent crook. Not only did he defeat her, but also took the signs, because of which she had to re-get them. The young man was only worried about the fact that he spent a lot of time to defeat her. It took him more than an hour to defeat his older sister. Hyun was stronger than he thought, but so far she has not revealed the energy of her sword and has not learned how to use his abilities. If she had this knowledge, she would be able to overcome Chaw without a chance for him, so the young man thought. At that time, Hyun reminded him of the promised reward for victory. After all, a promise is a promise, and now she will call him an older brother. But Chaw was more irritated by this than glad, so he asked not to say so anymore. The young lady did not understand why he did not like it so much, but there was no time to discuss it, because they could be late for his father. Once in front of the door to the office of the head of the clan, the young gentleman and the lady worried a little. But there was no time for this, and Chaw opened the door. Entering the room, they greeted the father, crouching on his knee as a sign of respect. Taishin was also glad to see them and asked to sit down. Father heard that both heirs successfully completed their first course of cadet training. He was interested in what each of them saw and felt. With Hyun, she looked at Chaw as if waiting for him to say something first. But still, she decided to speak first, saying that during the cadet training, she saw the true face of their family. The father did not quite understand what she had in mind. Hyun replied that she knew that the whole system was based on competition, but she saw how things that she could not endure were happening. She was for honesty in any form. Taishin was glad to see the youngest daughter grew. Previously it was more tearful and shy, but now it has become bolder. He suggested that Chaw was the reason for her changes, so he was also interested in what the younger one felt in his first year. Chaw replied that he felt only shame. The cadet corps is the basis of a clan of martial arts masters, but the current corps functions incorrectly. Such an answer was not quite pleased with Taishin. He expected to hear something else. The young man added that the cadets did not fight. They could be weak or lose, but those who stop the battle are not suitable for the clan Li. And the main problem was the abilities of teachers or teaching methods. They are too kind to the cadets. Chaw's speech sounded extremely self-confident. His father appreciated this. The fact that each of the children forms his own way of thinking as a cadet is worthy of admiration. But you always need to be on your guard. It is very difficult to expand the horizons of your own views. Chaw was surprised at his words, because before his father had never given them such advice. The children thanked his father for his advice and promised to take them into account in the future. Taishin also heard about how they managed to pass exams that differed from the previous ones at his request. He was proud that the heirs understood this and conscientiously fulfilled their duties. Therefore, he called them to reward, although it is usually strict in matters of rewards and punishments. Hyun did not hesitate and immediately said that in this case she wants armor from the Dragon of Scales. Taishin agreed and replied that he would report to the weapons so that she could take them tomorrow. Chaw in turn asked his father permission to rise to the Mountain of Heavenly Power. This excited Taishin and extremely surprised with the Hyun, but his father did not refuse his request. Chaw collected things that he would take with him to the mountain. He took the encyclopedia of herbs, an iron boiler, and a couple of medical instruments. The Mountain of Heavenly Power is the sacred mountain, where much of what will help the young man to make powerful elixirs. On the island, he could only prepare weak medicines, but now he could make medicines stronger and before the warrior test before. A warrior test is the last task for the children of the Li clan, after which they are officially recognized as warriors. The place that they should visit before his passage is Mount Chongasan, or the Mountain of Heavenly Power. Moreover, this mountain was a place that he was simply obliged to visit once, in order to finally reveal the secrets of his sword, which he chose on the ritual of steel. While Chaw was collecting his things, a nanny knocked on his room. She apologized for anxiety and notified him that he had received a message. Chaw did not quite understand what kind of message. Ha had enough added that this was an invitation from the seventh heir to the clan Lee. Jihawk was glad to meet his younger brother again, the last time they seemed to see each other after Chuseok, the Korean harvest fee. The young gentleman confirmed this and was glad that the elder brother did not forget about it. Jihawk replied that he was not so stupid as to forget such things. As Chaw expected, the conversation with Jihawk would not be too simple. Although it was the usual conversation of the brothers over a cup of tea, he still felt that something was wrong. Jihawk invited him to try new tea. Tea was his only hobby, so he was supposed to be excellent. Chaw did not refuse to offer, asking him also whether he always treats his guests by tea. The elder brother replied that it depends on who his guest is, tea in their cups, from a foreign plantation that he visited 2 years ago. Even after several sips, he was in no hurry to proceed to the main thing. Chaw is well aware of how to keep the situation under control, and Jihawk was once again convinced that he had underestimated the youngest. Therefore, Jihawk decided to first start asking questions. He asked his younger brother whether he knew that the incident in the exam was planned by him and Sol A. Of course, Chaw guessed about it, but not without help with Hybes. Jihawk is better known as a politician, administrator, and commercial figure than as a military man. He knows how to build relationships without causing hostility, for this people call his golden sword. And yet Chaw did not see the enemy in him. Jihawk continued to talk about the exam, pleading his guilt in the incident, and was ready to apologize if Charlie needed it. But Chaw replied that it was not necessary to apologize. He is not obliged to demand this. Such an answer was surprised by the older brother. The young man added that this is normal, because such things will often happen in their future competitions. After all, Jihawk and Salt did so of their own free will, and not because they had no choice because of the desire of Madame Back. He asked the boy if he considered him an enemy. Chaw replied that yes, because in a different way about a man who touches his people and openly plots something against him, he cannot think. This put Jihawk in a stupor. He did not know what to do, whether he should now crush the boy in order to get rid of troubles in the future. But still, he decided to simply ask his younger brother what he wants from him. Chaw asked him to show a little sincerity, because this time not only the young man suffered. Jihawk liked that the young man demands compensation instead of apologies, so he agreed to send a decent amount of elixir to students of the 5th grade, as well as give out a decent reward. Chaw was grateful, and since his brother went to many concessions, he would no longer raise this issue. Jihawk replied that probably Chaw will be the only brother he understands the most, but the young heir was not sure of that. After such a pleasant conversation, Chaw thanked Jihawk for hospitality and said that it was time for him to leave. Before leaving, the older brother gave him a little advice, so that he was more careful with Salt and, because unlike him, she really does not like him. Chaw replied that it does not matter because he will be at home the whole next year. Meanwhile, in the room of the 6th heiress Salt, the situation is aggravated. Unwon was disappointed in her daughter, and in the fact that she could not knock Chaw from the exam. After that, she did not even want her daughter to call her a mother, because she did not raise her with such a loser. But Salt, and tried to justify herself before her mother, saying that she did not try to use the mission as an excuse to escape. But Dvo-Yong was furious due to the failure of the Salt and did not want to see it after that. Salt and did not understand why my mother did not even want to listen to her and was furious. What she did was just running away from responsibility that Lee's descendant should never do. If Salte was a real child, Grand-Yong, she would not endure this act. But the daughter did not understand why she could not take responsibility for it right now. What prevents her from dealing with an illegitimate heir right now? The point was that Chaw went to the Mountain of Heavenly Power for a whole year. Therefore, it was necessary to deal with him until this point. Now it's too late. Perhaps the Salt could fix something, but she overwhelmed everything, and with this incident substituted all direct descendants. Leaving, Jana only said that if the daughter and next time show such a miserable sight, then she would not get off with a simple blow. At this time, Solin went to the room Jihawk, who also failed his task, but Dvu did not break into it. Salt was not in itself with anger. The only thing she wanted at that moment was to kill the younger heir. Jihawk understood how cruel is Darling, and that after such an older sister would be obsessed with the idea of making amends. Therefore, he was interested in who would be stronger, Salt A or Chaw, which of them is more valuable. A year later, on the day when the boy is returning, Jihawk will watch an amazing sight. Sitting into the car to go to the Mountain of Heavenly Power, Chaw was a little surprised and felt uncomfortable. He did not understand why the butler was traveling with him, but Choi replied that it was only a couple of short days. The butler was glad that their paths accidentally crossed. He had something to ask the young master. He just spends the graves before the Lunar New Year. He also needs to convey something to the keeper of the mountain. Besides, he is here on behalf of the patriarch. Chaw replied that he was glad to be his presence. Now he would not be so lonely. But still he did not believe in the accident of their meeting. Choi, although he looked like an ordinary butler, but still possessed some kind of force, because not just like that, his role in the clan was above the rest of the foremen. Chaw could not even measure the distance between them. The butler heard that the young man wants to visit Mount Sunma before going to Cheongbisan, and asked him why the young heir decided to visit the mountain of his ancestors. Chaw replied that he also wanted to visit the grave of his ancestors before his departure in order to express respect them. Choi was delighted with the act of the young man. Many older generations would be favorably relate to his worship to his ancestors. The butler wanted to ask Chaw something else, asking before whether to talk to the young man. Chaw replied that he did not mind, and Choi asked him if he would like campaigns, to which the young man replied that he had not been in a real campaign before. The butler understood him. Before he also climbed onto all sorts of mountains. Once he climbed onto a rocky mountain where there was no path, so he paved his way for himself. Choi asked the young master, but how would he climb into such a mountain? The young man replied that in this case he would climb slowly and calmly, looking up, so he would definitely be able to climb the mountain. Choi confirmed his words. In such a way the young man will really be able to climb to the top. But it works a little differently. Sometimes you need to look back or to the side to make sure that you are moving in the right direction. If you look only up, you can go astray and go a long way. The higher the mountain, the more difficult it is to climb it. Chaw understood what the butler was talking about. He hinted at the very test of the warrior. After the rebirth, Chaw was busy obtaining new things and completely forgot to master the abilities. But he did not think that this was a problem. With this approach, sooner or later he would have achieved the goal. The young gentleman thanked the butler for his wise words. It was more important that they arrived at the right place. Mount Sunmu is another important place that Chaw must visit. The young heir heard that only those who wear the blood of the LA clan, or have permission to do so, can pass through the gates of the mountains. He was curious whether Choi could go through them. Choi replied that it was an honor for him to obtain permission from the patriarch himself, Clan Lee. Along the way, Choi says that he would go to draw the graves of his ancestors, and asked what the young man would do at that moment. He replied that he would visit the memorable board of the founder of the clan. At the moment when Chaw passed through the gate, he felt a strange feeling. The feeling that he fell into a completely different world, where everything was felt differently. On this, their paths diverge with the butler. Choi tells the young man that he hopes that he will achieve what he wants. Chaw thanked the butler and went in his way. He arrived at the grave of the first patriarch, the founder of the great clan Lee. Opening the door and entering the room, Chaw said, "Lee representative, respected for his combat merits, expresses respect to the founder of the clan, as a sign of respect to the founder." This place was rightfully considered sacred, because it belonged to the first patriarch of the clan. It was very rude to get the sword at the grave of the ancestors, but Chaw could do anything about it, because he acted in accordance with the fact that the founder himself prepared. He laid a sword that he chose during the steel ritual, the great weapon of the founder of the clan Lee himself, Black Dusk. But Black Dusk is not a very ordinary sword, but even a superpowerful weapon. It was a family secret that his older brother was revealed before his degeneration. 9 seals were placed on it, and Chaw was known only about 4 of them. The first seal said that the owner needs to prove his skill. The second seal demanded to prove its belonging to Lee, respecting the army. The third seal was to undergo a naming ceremony created by the founder of the Lee clan. And so, he managed to fulfill the conditions of all 3 seals. Now he needed a new hint. For this he arrived in the grave of the founder of the Lee clan. Pouring water on the sword, he began to shine, and with him the portrait of the founder on which something appeared. This was the next hint, and she was on the very grief of Chongwi, where Chaw was planning to head. Jongvi, she is Mount Junggisan, became a mountain of heavenly power after the founder of the clan felt her energy, and after that, he chose this place to teach future generations. Mana around was very thick. Chaw saw this in the records, but watched live for the first time. Meanwhile, a butler came up to him who also finished his affairs. Together they discussed how beautiful the landscapes of the mountains could be. Chaw noted that Jonggisan is different from Songam and other mountains. But their modest conversation was interrupted by a stranger who looked like a drunkard and grumbled that it became noisy around again. Suddenly, the defenders from Lee clan appeared next to him and the butler. Chaw did not even notice how they appeared. The stranger's appearance found even more broodly. He asked them to remove swords kindly, but the guards refused and prepared to go to the combat rack. But the stranger's huge and powerful palm was already behind one of them. With a powerful blow, he simply trampled the guard's head in the ground. He wanted to solve everything peacefully, but it seems that you could not do without a fight. Chaw was simply surprised by the stranger's power, looking at how the guards could not do anything against him. As a result, it was not difficult to defeat their stranger. He easily defeated several people, turning their weapons into scrap metal. He was laughed at their attack, because they did not have the slightest chance against him. The stranger knew the butler and asked him why he did not notify at least a month about his arrival. In addition, if he came without a drink, he is the end. Choi apologized for this, but nevertheless noted that he went too far. After his words, the stranger got even more angry. Really, the butler became so bold as to answer him. But Chaw still did not understand who this man was. The butler apologized for the later performance, and he introduced a stranger as the keeper of Mount Chongyisan. He was also surprised when Si Luno was it really the same boy that Tae Shin picked up on the street.